Right then, let's go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 2-on-1 Powerchair Football podcast powered by MK Battery. A huge thank you, as always, to MK Battery for powering the podcast and every National League live stream for the 25-26 season. This is episode 52, and today we're recapping Gameweek 4 of the 25-26 Slater and Gordon Premiership. My name is Ryan Sipple, and joining me once again is Gregg Baxter. Greg, how are you?
Hello, Ryan. Hello, everyone. I am good, thank you. It was a very good weekend for Powerchair Football. Delighted to be back recapping the Prem.
It certainly was. And we're also delighted to be joined by one David D. David, welcome back to the podcast. How are you?
Oh, I'm very excited to be back. I'm tired because it's very early in the morning, but I'm very excited to crack through this podcast.
I'm not sure we can categorize 10 a.m. as early in the morning, but I will let you off slightly because it was a busy weekend for you. Now, gents, I know every big weekend in the National League tends to get labelled the best, the biggest, the most dramatic, but it's often hard to argue to the contrary, certainly after that weekend, because the level across Game Week 4 was exceptional. The quality of football, the intensity of the matches, the significance of the results. Everywhere you looked, there were games that mattered. There were moments that shifted momentum, changed the table. And I genuinely don't think it is biased. I don't see another domestic league anywhere in the world right now that can match this incredible combination of quality and depth. David, I'm going to come to you here straight away. You're competing at the very, very top of the championship. You want to be in this top flight next season. But this was also your first ever taste of Premiership football, coming along to support with the commentary. How do you assess the level and the talent on show from the sidelines?
I think when it comes to the difference between the two divisions, it's a stark contrast in the fact that the intensity and the quality on show was miles above the Championship from what I played. Don't get me wrong, the Championship's got some very high quality players and a very high quality teams, but the Premiership is just another level. It's ruthless, it's unforgiving, and it's pure entertainment.
And to you, Greg, obviously you're in the thick of things. You're a reigning champion with Teesside. Has there been a noticeable shift since last season, or are we just seeing more teams kind of raise their level and it's a more concentrated pack at the top?
Yes and no. I think there now obviously is we're back to a 4-horse title race. We have been all season as well. It's not like a couple of teams have just come out of nowhere. We're seeing, again, almost like mini leagues form. So you've got like the 4 at the top, then you've got the next 4 below them. This was a mini league for the like middle spots, and then a 4-way race at the bottom. So it's almost like we've developed into 3 mini leagues within one. And so there's drama and there's tight and close races wherever you look, and it's just brilliant for the sport because you don't go into any game going, oh, this is going to be a bit boring, maybe with nothing riding on it. There is something riding on every game. Even going back to like Game Week 3, you're thinking this could have great implications for the end of the season. So it's fantastic for the sport, as I said, and fantastic for the neutral. I'm sure David really enjoyed it.
I'm sure he did. Before we go into the team by team, I just want to take a moment to highlight a few things that most definitely elevated the weekend. Firstly, the work of Alex Dowding. People watching at home may have noticed the varied camera angles, the replay capability, the analysis, the functionality to annotate is a huge development for the streaming. And for those who were at the Lee Westwood Centre, you would have seen the setup and you would have probably heard us on commentary talk about this new development in the streaming space. But for those not present, we essentially now have, it's almost like a VAR style monitor in front of us. We can watch moments back in real time. We can click things. We can properly analyze what's happening on the court as it unfolds. and I know it's only going to get better. I'm so excited for game week 5 and thinking about where we can build on this. So all credit to Alex Dowding on that. Just quickly, gents, you were both on commentary across the weekend. How good is it to have a live monitor, a screen to reference, to clip, to replay? We're like kids in a candy shop.
Oh yeah, I think it's absolutely fantastic. Just the ability to be able to go to live action replays, show great moments of quality or some sort of decisive moment again, and be able to analyze it and stop, and then have the different camera angles. Because we've said before, obviously the setup's been elite for ages, but there's only been one camera at one end. So when action happens at the other end, it's hard to sort of zoom in and focus it on a camera. So yeah, I was absolutely enjoying it when I remembered to turn the camera.
David, how'd you find it?
I thought it's just a level up to the streaming quality and the viewer experience. Really, I think the pen as well. It can really highlight what the commentator means when they're trying to highlight a specific moment of play or a specific idea that they're trying to show to the audience. And I think it reminds me a lot of Monday Night Football, to be honest, where you've got Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher using the pen to direct, saying, "Oh, it's this phase of play and this moment of play." It's very similar to that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what we're going for. So in the last 10 days, we have introduced this level of streaming and detail to the Championship weekend. We then, of course, broke new ground with that stream of the John Good Group WFA Cup between Greenbank and Leeds. So myself and Charlie McClellan were doing remote commentary from hundreds of miles away, but we were still able to ensure that production value. And then it took another step up for the Premiership this weekend just gone, and we know for game week 5 that it's going to be increased and enhanced even more, which is incredibly exciting.
One thing I'd love to ask you, Ryan, because obviously we've been doing this for a few years now, is did you find you had to sort of break traditional, like your sort of rigorous like routine of, for the last 4 years we've been watching it live with our own eyes on the court in front of us, whereas now if I'm doing the camera, I almost have to be watching it on the stream itself on the VAR type iPad, and having to try it, sort of condition myself to go doing that now rather than watching it live in front of me, because it's so much like second nature to just watch it in front of me. And I saw Dylan Kelso like a near post in front of me, and I'm like, don't turn your head to look at it, because you need to watch this in case the camera changes.
I will say that the setups on Court A and Court B currently are very different. So there isn't the need to watch it through the monitor. So just to describe to our listeners unfamiliar, Court A, we have a 2-camera setup that ensures that we capture the whole court. So when it's up one end, you need to flick to one camera and vice versa for the other. That isn't the case on Court B. So you can almost concentrate on what's in front of you, and you can supplement and introduce the varied camera angles if and when you want. But we have to evolve. It's very different from the days where there was just a static camera, fisheye lens in the center of the court. The production value has skyrocketed, and as mentioned, we're looking to do even more for game week 5, and then who knows where we can take it next season.
No, I remembered the fisheye when I was in my first National League season. I think it was like silent, no commentary, middle of the court, couldn't see on the other side. It was difficult to analyse from a team perspective, but you know what? We all have to come from somewhere at some point. But it looks how far we've come now, to be honest, with the production value.
Well, we were sat with karaoke mics, weren't we, Ryan? We were sat with like little handheld karaoke mics on the sideline, looking like we're doing our best impression of Elvis, trying to discuss the live action in front of us. It was those were the days, eh?
They certainly were, and exactly that, David. You have to start somewhere, and here we are, I think 4 or 5 years later, and it's incredibly exciting. And I think we are the pioneers for certainly impairment specific sport, but the production value we have with the budget we have and the personnel available, it's world leading. There are some mainstream sports that can't boast a level of quality like we have. So Long may it continue. Just lastly, before we get into the breakdown, as always, a huge thank you to Jeff Lewis, the chief statistician for both the podcast and our commentary. Now, those listening who aren't part of the commentary team probably won't know, but for every single game, Jeff prepares an incredibly detailed brief for us, highlighting milestones, historical context, potential records, all the little details that bring matches to life. And it's honestly elevated our commentary tenfold. And of course, that extends to the podcast as well. So anytime I come out with a stat that sounds even remotely impressive, just know I'm taking absolutely zero credit for it. Every single one of those has come from Jeff. So right then, let's get straight into it. As always, we'll be working our way from 12th up to the top of the table, breaking down the results, momentum, and what it all now means heading into that final weekend. We'll also, of course, be highlighting and acknowledging the Swizzles Award winners from across the weekend. We typically have FA Full-Time or WFA Scoreline up, so we would recommend you to do that. So at the bottom of the table, we've got Muscle Warriors. And yet again, another incredibly tough weekend on paper. 5 games, 5 defeats, a 7-0 loss to Leeds, 1-0 to West Bromwich Albion Throstles, 6-0 to Teesside, 5-0 to Aspire, and then a 2-1 defeat to West Bromwich Albion to round things off. So if you look at the results, it reads like more of the same, something we've come to expect from game weeks 1, 2, and 3. But I am going to say this is the best version of Muscle Warriors we've seen all season. And I think you have to really look beyond the numbers to understand that. Yes, the Leeds result is heavy. Yes, there are some incredibly comprehensive defeats in there. But outside of that, there were positives. There were signs of growth. There were signs of development, signs of a bit more chemistry, things we've been calling for all season long, and stuff we haven't seen from any of the other 3 weekends. That Throttles game is a really good example of that. I had the pleasure of commentating on it, and Muscles were in it for really long periods. They were disciplined, they stayed compact, they didn't get pulled out their shape, they made it really difficult. And they limited the chance of the opposition. They stayed in the game for a long time. And it took one moment of quality, of magic, late on to separate it. And something we've spoken about on every single one of these recaps is that's the difference at this level. If you lapse in concentration for even a second, you get punished, because that is what this division does. And if we bypass the loss to Aspire, the most telling sign of their progress is their final game versus West Bromwich Albion. That's the one. They take the lead early through Rick and Shah, and you're thinking this could be it. This could be the first win of their season. It took a Zach Dickey equaliser just before half-time and then another right at the end to take the game away from them. But West Brom came away incredibly frustrated. They had to work for it. It wasn't comfortable. And that's where the bigger question comes in. If this group had regular training, what could they actually do in this division? Gregg, I'll bring you in firstly. You were one of their opponents across game week 4. And I remember and recall you saying it looks comfortable on paper, but they just didn't let us find our rhythm. We found it slightly difficult.
Yeah, firstly, I echo everything you've just said about Muscle Warriors this weekend. I thought they were much, much better. There were so many more positives to take for the side. For me, I think we almost had one eye on, as you're not meant to do, we had one eye on that West Brom game, didn't we? Because it just was such a shock when they were 1-0 up. And then they were holding up. We were going, there's a lot of time left, so West Brom surely will come back into it. They didn't really, and it took last 30 seconds of the first half, last 20 seconds of the second half, and it must have been a heartbreaking end to their weekend because they put so much into that game and so much into the weekend. Our game, it was only 1-0 at half time. And for us, with no disrespect to Muscle Warriors, that's really disappointing. We weren't at the races for a lot of it. And we rightfully got, a telling off at half time saying, what are you doing? But I think that just goes to show that they were making it much more difficult. They were more disciplined with their 2-on-1s. That's been something we've been saying all season long, is they're giving so many sloppy 2-on-1s away. And that just, when you're under pressure, the last thing you want to do is give away those free kicks to just keep the pressure coming back at you over and over and over again, because you're bound to then break and make mistakes. So there was less of those. They were showing a bit more bravery going forward, wanted to pass it. They just were disciplined and arguably didn't get some sort of reward for their efforts this weekend, because to come away from that fixture list as well, you look at it on paper, West Brom, Leeds, Aspire, Teesside, it just would have been, they just feared the worst. And I think they can take a lot of heart and determination from their performances and take that into game week 5, where they have more manageable fixtures. And if they're going to go down, they're going to go down swinging. You think they're going to have a role to play in the relegation race?
Most definitely. David, give me your assessments from Muscle Warriors game week 4.
I think on the surface, it looks a harsh, difficult, just demanding weekend for Muscle Warriors. And it was demanding and it was difficult, but there are highlights. I did commentate on that WBA Thrussels and Muscle Warriors games with you, Ryan. And you are right in saying it did take a moment of magic from Amy Wharton to get the win. And that could have been the second point for Muscle Warriors this season. It could have hoped maybe given them a better chance to stay up. But the result that, again, really stands out to me has also been highlighted was the game against West Brom, and the fact that they held out for 39 minutes, kept it going, and only conceded because of a corner. That is positive against former and league champions. 4 times in a row, West Brom have won the league. And to go only lose to them in the last second of the game, that's really impressive. And the fact is, it isn't over, because there's only 5 points for them, separating them and a playoff spot for GW Knights. And in the last game weekend, they do face Middlesbrough, Villa, GW Knights and Sevenoaks. They could be expecting, if they wanted to, 9 possible points from that weekend. If they do, that could really help them in their efforts to survive the league.
The version we saw against Albion and Thrussels is competitive. That's easily on level with Sevenoaks, GBG Knights, maybe even Middlesbrough on their day. And they are teams that are well above them in their fight for safety. And when you put this into context, this is a squad that is now on a 19-game winless run, the worst in their history. So to be even having the conversation about competitiveness and improvement, it tells you how far they've come, even if the results haven't necessarily followed. And the other point I often go to is, if this season was longer, if we weren't now steamrolling almost into the final weekend of the season, if there was 2 or 3 more game weeks to contest, could they actually build on this? They've scored 4 goals all season, which is fairly damning. They've also scored 8 own goals, nearly half of all the own goals in the Premiership. And that stat alone, I think, tells you everything about how and where they've struggled with the structure, the communication, the shared understanding. These are the same words I've been saying after every recap. Jacob Vickers and Ricken Shah, we know the level they can hit. You will know firsthand, David, having competed against them twice last season. We saw it across the Championship. They were division leading players in 24-25, but they've struggled to consistently impose themselves in the Premiership. Dakota Hannum and Sean Donaher playing those high, wide roles are so isolated. There's a real disconnect between the defence and the attack, which probably shows why they've only scored 4 goals. And something highlighted in the Game Week 3 pod by Gregg, they give away a lot of 2-on-1s. And I think a lot of them could be avoidable with a little bit more time on the training court, because that's where you get that time together, the repetition, the understanding. There was also no Henry Barnard this weekend, which limited things even further in attack. So look, I do really want to focus on the positives, because relative to where they were earlier in the season, there are positives here. But this division, as we've discussed, is relentless. It doesn't wait for you to improve. Even when you get better, even when you take strides forward, if you're not at the level consistently, you still get punished. And that's sadly been the story of their season.
I think if you look at it, just take the take the positives out of it. You went 1-0 up against West Brom and were nearly leading at half time, if not level. And in our game, it took an own goal from them for us to break the deadlock up before half time. We didn't actually score our goal. So you're looking at that, it was unfortunate. But you take that out and then 0-0 against us, and we're having a much more difficult conversation at half time. Because we got that, we were able to relax a little bit. There are so many more positives to write. And maybe to David's point, I possibly should have written them off a little bit earlier than I possibly should have. Because their fixtures in Game Week 5 are, if they show the level they did this Game Week, are much more manageable, and they can have a real say in perhaps getting a couple of wins. And that would see them out of almost nowhere go from bottom of the table with a goal difference of -66, 1 point all season, to somehow on the last game week leapfrogging 1 or 2 teams and suddenly find themselves in a playoff spot. That would have been unheard of or unthinkable after Game Week 3, wouldn't it, Ryan?
It absolutely would have. And that's why this division is so crazy, and why the margins are so fine. And just looking at the fixture list of Sevenoaks and GBG Knights in Game Week 5, Muscle Warriors have the kindest run-in. So if they are able to pick up a bit of momentum, if they can get Henry Barnard back in, if they can force themselves to train with each other once or twice across the next 2-3 weeks, there is no reason why they can't use Game Week 4 as the foundation. And as we've said, the version against West Bromwich Albion in their final game probably matches or betters the likes of Sevenoaks and GBG Knights at the moment. So crazily, we're talking about a Muscle Warriors side that has the potential to claw their way from the bottom of the standings to potential safety, which I don't think they would have believed you. That could have been a fact coming into the weekend. But we shall see. As David mentioned, fixture list opens against Middlesbrough before they play Villa Rockets, and then the Super Sunday at the top and the bottom, by the way. Muscle Warriors play GBG Knights and Sevenoaks, the 2 teams directly above them. So now let's progress to Sevenoaks, just above Muscle Warriors in 11th. And I think this genuinely might be the most unlucky side in the entire National League at the moment. 5 games across the weekend, and it ends without a win. A heavy 7-0 defeat to Greenbank to start things off, followed by a 3-0 loss to Teesside, a 0-0 draw with GBG Knights in what was a massive 6-point game. And the one they would have realistically targeted coming into Game Week 4. And then on Sunday, a 2-0 defeat to Newcastle United Foundation and a 3-0 loss to league leaders Leeds. So what you're looking at, 4 defeats, 1 draw, just the 1 clean sheet in that GBG fixture, and a weekend again where the margins just don't fall their way, particularly in that game that mattered most in the context of the table. 5 fixtures is hard enough, but the schedule didn't help them at all. There was an incredibly tight turnaround on their games on Saturday, which certainly took its toll, especially heading into that last game against GBG Knights, the 6-pointer, the one that could define their season. And they were plagued with chair-related issues, battery-related issues. It was so unfortunate. There was also no Chris King all weekend, which means they were putting their complete trust and reliance in their young squad, their young wingers in Stanley Ball and George Chippy, who had to navigate over 200 minutes of football with very little rest. But they, to their credit, they absolutely stuck at it. Then Sunday morning, Kyle Alexander's chair gives way against Newcastle. He was forced off, and then suddenly your central player, your organizer, your orchestrator, the one who carries you, isn't there to support you, to give you that shape. And it just seemed like one issue after the other. But just like Muscle Warriors, in and amongst all the difficulty, in and amongst all the losses, for me, there is a huge amount of positives. And that's something I think we will talk about a lot on this podcast, and we will implore our listeners to do, is to look beyond the numbers, because there's stories to be told. And Sevenoaks, there certainly is. Gregg, I'll come to you first. Give me your assessments on Sevenoaks. Of course, a former player and someone who faced them in game week 4. It's you have to feel for them, don't you?
Oh, it honestly breaks my heart at times. It really does, because I know we both know, everyone knows what these boys have been through the last 12 months. It just doesn't seem to be ending for them at any point anytime soon. How they're able to keep going, I do not know, and is massive credit to themselves, their families, and the club itself. That it's such a family-run club, so well tidy with the community. I think we saw that the weekend before. They were mascots at Sevenoaks Town in non-league. They're just a great bunch of guys, and they're not getting the rub of green or a break at any point that they just richly deserve. I think it was poignant that both Stan and George were the Swizzles' unsung heroes of the weekend, because they had to put some effort in, especially in that Leeds game, last game, when you've already been through 4 games, playing the full 40, no rest, and then you play the team who are, top of the table with this quality they have, with 3 players, no Kyle Alexander because he couldn't play due to his chair breaking, and they held it to 3-0, and I think that is, and it's clean sheet in the second half. That is heroic work. It really was. They've dug deep a lot and they've stuck together. I think to do the people that are no longer with us proud. And it's been a struggle on the court at times. Decision making hasn't quite been there at some points, in chair preparation and ball contact, but they're learning, they're growing. And I think for Sevenoaks, this is fair to say that they view it either way, whatever happens this season, there are positives to take moving forward. If they stay up, it's another year for Stan and George to develop it as a Premiership winger duo. If they go down, they've got the opportunity to blend some of the youngsters through. That Acorns team we saw at the Vars, there are some promising players in that. And if they go down, it means they can bring them in. They're not have to throw them in right at the deep end of the Premiership where they're not ready. They can come into the Championship, give the team some vital numbers, because they can't just keep going with 4 or 5 players. We've been saying that for years with Sevenoaks. And they can then take their time, develop, and come together as a group. What I would say is, yes, it hasn't gone their way, but they've stuck together. They are still in such high spirits. Me and you I always have dinner with them on a Saturday night. It's tradition now. They're always laughing, enjoying. There's smiles on their faces all the time. So obviously I have a soft spot for Sevenoaks, and it hasn't gone well on the court, but all the context off the court means, the fact they're still going in itself is a win.
David, you called a few of their games across the weekend. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I called the Teesside Sevenoaks game and the GBG Knights game, and Sevenoaks, as Gregg has highlighted, and yourself, Ryan, they've gone through a period of time which no club should go through. A period of time in which they've struggled to even get the numbers and keep going. And I think it's just a question of you have to give kudos to them in some instances for staying afloat and to keep fighting in the Premiership. But to highlight specifically one of their games, I'm going to highlight the GBG Knights game against, because they, as you've highlighted, they would have targeted that game, saying, you know what, if we win this game, this will give us a really good chance of us getting playoffs. Because I think at that point in time, if they won that game, they would have gone into the playoff spot. But that game, it never looked as if anyone was going to score GBG Knights nor Sevenoaks. It was more of the game of very cagey, very safe, rather than trying to go for the win and attack. And I think that's kind of been the story of Sevenoaks' season so far, in the fact they've, rather than saying, you know what, we'll go for it now, you know, we're going to try and score, we're going to.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that as a fact, but their players were being pushed off at the end due to those battery-related issues. And just looking at the turnaround of games, their first fixture of the weekend was the 9:30. Then they contested the 1 o'clock, and then again at the 3:20. So they had a 1 game off. I don't think there is the possibility that chairs can get fully recharged in that shorter gap. So with that GBG Knights game, knowing how season defining it could potentially be, it was so frustrating that it came at the end of a 3 fixture day. So I kind of really do feel for them, because that's kind of a factor out of their control. But they're now on a 20-game winless run, which is their longest since I think there was a 26-game stretch back in 2011, 2012, when they were in their relative infancy. So historically, it shows they're in a very tough place. But the key thing is they're not necessarily being completely overrun. And this is where I would encourage people to look beyond the numbers. They are structured, they are disciplined, they are making teams work for it. Before Kyle went off against Newcastle, I thought they were excellent. They were organised, compact, really difficult to break down. James Mason stood out again, and you can clearly see the connection between himself and Kyle. Defensively, they throw everything at it, closing the gaps, committing fully. They often slam into each other to try and prevent the opposition from scoring, which often sees them come off worse for wear. But it shows how much heart they have. George Shippey, Stanley Ball collectively performing in that defensive winger type role, the unseen work, very much that Miles Miller profile, managing the space on the edge of the box. He would be incredibly proud of them. And I think it's only right that they collectively were recognised as the Swizzles unsung heroes of the weekend, because that's what it was, that they were stepping in, playing a lot of minutes, holding things together in really difficult circumstances. And I think Gregg's already touched on it. The Leeds game, so I was calling the Newcastle game. I saw the issue with Kyle's chair, and I was praying that the issue could be addressed or fixed in the gap between the 2 fixtures. But to see Kyle come in his manual chair, I knew that they was going to have to contest it with 3 players, which you don't want to do against any team in the division, let alone what many are saying is one of the most attacking outfits the sport has ever seen in this country. But my God, do they deserve credit. I expected that game to be far more comprehensive. I think Gregg and I said it would be an emphatic defeat for Sevenoaks, but it didn't play out that way. And the 3-0 was a fairly fair scoreline, it has to be said. The frustration for me is that issue with Kyle's chair, because I've noticed that issue across the season. This isn't something new for Game Week 4. The instability when he drives forward at full speed is dangerous, and it isn't a new issue, as I said. So to still be talking about it at the end of March in Game Week 4, a potentially season-defining weekend, is frustrating, because it's something you feel could have been avoided or at least managed far earlier. Don't you think, Gregg?
Go longer than this season. That's been a thing with Carl's chair for a good couple of years. He's always had the sort of jump whenever he reverses, then wants to go forward straight away. He's always jumped forward. His bumper's gone in the air. So yeah, a lot longer than sort of this season. I think it just is frustrating that it hasn't been sorted. I think there is some context behind that, given who the sort of chair mechanic at Seven Oaks usually was to sit in this season. No, it just hasn't been able to happen. But yeah, longer than this season, definitely.
Yeah, I think we figured out the problem when I was on commentary. Is when the Seven Oaks Teesside game, basically, I think one of his back wheels is higher than the other. So even when it's down, you've still got one wheel that's off the ground, which causing him to tip up. So on the surface, it does seem like it can be fixed, but for me, Seven Oaks, it's vital that it is fixed before Game Week 5.
It's an absolute non-negotiable.
Yeah, no, it's his back cast wheel, because obviously I was in the Teesside game, they saw it at half time. So we thought, because Harry Battery's dad Steve came in at the dinner that evening, and we thought he'd fixed it, and we were over the moon. Obviously it turns out it hadn't happened, but they were just, even in our game, they were defensively sound, they frustrated us. Another 3-0 scoreline. There is such heart and grit in this team to stick together. It's always a pleasure to play them.
Yeah, I think when you zoom out, the run is concerning, and the results aren't necessarily there, but they are, 2 points from safety. That's one win. And that's why that GBG game hurts so much, because in hindsight, that's the one that could potentially flip everything. And now it all comes down to Game Week 5, assuming Chris King is back, assuming they fix that issue with Kyle's chair. Fixtures against Villa Rocket, Middlesbrough, Muscle Warriors and Aspire, a fairly mixed run-in. But the opportunity, particularly in those games versus the teams around them, to find a way out and potentially secure their place in the 26-27 Premiership. I think, gents, it's probably fair to say that the best case scenario for Seven Oaks now would be that 10th place playoff position, because they're not catching Middlesbrough in 9th.
Yeah, that playoff spot is absolutely what they're aiming for, which is why GBG United's game will hurt. And again, I go back to it, that Muscle Warriors game, well, they were 1-0 up with sort of 5 minutes to go. I think this is Game Week 2, going back to now. That Muscle Warriors game, they were 1-0 up with a couple of minutes left. Didn't see the game out, and that honestly could well be the difference between them getting the playoff spot and them and then going down automatically.
Absolutely. So now let's progress. In 10th place, we've got GBG Knights, and on paper, another difficult weekend, just like the two teams below them. 5 games, no wins, and crucially, no goals scored. A 5-0 defeat to Teesside, a 1-0 loss to Aspire, a 0-0 draw with Seven Oaks, 2-0 defeat to Newcastle United Foundation, and then a narrow 1-0 defeat to Middlesbrough. So it's 1 point from a possible 15, and more concerningly, no attacking output across the entire weekend. Defensively, certainly in Game Weeks 4, they weren't miles away. That they're staying in games, they're keeping margins relatively tight in spells, but going forward, they just look completely short of ideas. There's a real lack of connection between the defence and the attack, and at the moment they don't look like a side that is going to score. David, I'm going to throw to you first here. Give me your thoughts on GBG Knights.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you say that there's no attacking output because it's such a different contrast to the one that we saw in the Championship last season. They scored so many goals last season. They were on fire. That every single game they were putting 3 or 4 past most teams. And it's just really interesting how just moving up to a higher division, that can completely flip on its head. And it was interesting to see that Ben Keat, the Australian, was not present this weekend for GW United. I thought he would have possibly made a very good attacking output for the side, but no, I think they would have targeted the Middlesbrough and the Sevenoaks games, and unfortunately they couldn't have got any points.
Just look back to the 24-25 season to look at that goal accumulation that you're referencing. GBG United's got 81 goals last season, the greatest in the entire National League, one more than Teesside, who were crowned champions of the Premiership. But I've also looked at the defence of Muscle Warriors. They only conceded 8 goals last season, which is fairly remarkable. They were the lowest conceders in the entire National League. So the contrast between Muscle Warriors and GBG United in the Championship compared to them in the Premiership is almost night and day, but it shows just how relentless this top flight is. Greg, give me your thoughts.
Yeah, they're a side that I think has come up and decided we're still going to try and play some attacking football. They want to try and move it. That's what their DNA was a little bit. Well, it was their DNA last year, as we've already said, the amount of goals they scored. I think they have tried to still try and play some attacking football this season.
2 goals they've scored this season. So are you sure about that statement?
I said they've tried.
Okay.
I said they've tried. Didn't say it's working. I said they've tried. But I think what endears me to them is the fact, whether to their detriment or not can be argued, but for me, I like to see sides get promoted and not change their DNA, not change who they are just to survive. You may argue that some teams have to if they want to stay up, but I like the fact that they are trying to at least play some football. They like playing back to Jack Ewins in the middle, Kai Shah, Oscar Smedley. They've got good pieces in there that we saw last season with kicking on. I think what you have to be is proactive and be thinking about your opposition and who you're being that open against, and that's where they're being let down, because they're not switching their style enough for me when they play sides above them. So for us as teams, obviously we like it when the game is more open, when there's more space for passing. When they want to try and do that, we're able to pick them off and play our own passing game, and that's where they're being unstuck for me.
I'm probably going to be a little bit more critical than I have been probably previously, because when I look at the teams around them, even in difficult circumstances, I can see something. With Muscle Warriors, I can see improvement. With Sevenoaks, you layer in the context, the availability, the chair issues, everything they're dealt with, you can still see positives. With GBG United, however, coming out of this weekend, I'm struggling to see some of those green shoots. Because as mentioned, defensively, they had a better weekend than those kind of around them. But when you actually watch the games, particularly against Sevenoaks and Middlesbrough, they look short of ideas almost. And that's almost the concern, because their setup feels very dependent on getting the ball into Jack Ewins and asking him to do the heavy lifting, forcing it up the court. Because he is a top quality player, dominant, excellent in the battle. But when that becomes your primary, almost only route forward, it limits everyone else. It isolates your attackers. It makes you predictable, and ultimately makes it very difficult to create chances. And the biggest red flag is they haven't scored in their last 10 league matches. It's their longest ever goalless run. And that's why those games against Sevenoaks and Middlesbrough felt so significant, because then they are moments where you have to be brave, to Dave's point. You have to try and win the games, not just avoid losing it. And just to add another layer, we've spoken about the 81 goals they scored in the Championship last season. We've spoken about how good they were. Look at the individual numbers. Look at the players like Oscar Smedley and George Holloway, who were absolutely prolific last season, and they're not getting a look in this. So the reality is that they do need to be better, but adding to that, they are still 10th. They're still in the playoff position, and if they finish there, they'll face the team who finishes third in the Championship for a place in next season's Premiership. And if we're being honest, we typically always back the Premiership side in that fixture. So with everything we're saying, there's still a very real chance they stay up. However, I want to get you boys in here. Arguably a controversial view, but maybe not, because Gregg's all but alluded to it. When I look at GBG Knights, Sevenoaks and Muscle Warriors, I actually see more benefits in them going down than staying up. Do we think the same can be applied to GBG Knights? Having that opportunity to reset, to rebuild, to bring younger players through, to recruit profiles that can train consistently and develop together. Is that a fair statement?
I disagree from a GBG Knights point of view. For me, I think that they're best served staying up. I don't know what the full context of the sort of players coming through at GBG Knights is. Yeah, I know they've got the Saracens, but for me, you don't touch Saracens at the minute. They're their own entity almost. You do not break that side up. They're building something. So I think GBG Knights are best served staying up, because I think I think they're missing. This is something I thought across the weekend when I watched them. I think they're missing. We said it last week, was like Teesside Steel. They're missing the other winger for me, I think, this season, and that's why I saw this weekend. There was a lack of conviction and quality in the final third, which wasn't there last season, but the Championship is a different ball game, obviously, to the Premiership. Some players have stepped up, some players are maybe struggling a little bit to get used to the pace. Give them another season, they may well kick on and find their confidence. You know what? We did stay up last season. We can do it. We proved we can. I need to believe that I do belong at this level. But I don't know if David agrees with me, but I think GBG Knights are, you know what, stay up, get some confidence in yourselves, attack it again.
Yeah, I actually do agree with you, Gregg. I think it would be best for them to stay up. But the only thing that is slightly bugging me about this is that I remember when Nomad Knights, what they originally called Nomad Knights, went down in the 23-24 season, they then brought in Oscar Smedley to play for them the 24-25 season. I'm saying, what happens if they did go down again, and then they brought in another young superstar who could be one of the futures for the country?
And that is why I pose the question, because the Premiership is relentless. It's unforgiving. Every lapse in concentration is punished. And I look at the player profiles. George Holloway got 46 goal contributions last season. He hasn't got a single one so far this season. Oscar Smedley was incredible last season. Unprecedented numbers in the Championship division for someone who made his first ever start in a National League season. He had 15 goals and 26 assists, because they were able to play front foot attacking football, which you cannot replicate at this level when you're constantly under pressure. So that's the reason I ask, is it a potential positive to go down? because Oscar Smedley, relatively speaking, is still incredibly inexperienced. And I think another season of football under his belt where he can start to impose himself and be proactive rather than reactive will help in the long term, rather than just this constant firefighting when we aren't seeing these players' potential flourish.
See, where I disagree with David's statement about, they're going down and bringing in Oscar. The difference was Saracens had failed to make the Championship that season. So they brought in Oscar so that he could play Championship football. They don't have that issue with Saracens this season because Saracens are in the Championship and are doing very well and building something, like I said. So where does that player come in to bring in? This is an interesting debate that we could have an entire podcast on probably, is would players prefer to drop down, develop it against weaker opposition and then come back up, but potentially going through the same process of realizing we're still a bit off the level? Or would you prefer to do a lot of firefighting in the Premiership, but continually testing yourself against players of a higher opposition and caliber level so that you end up eventually getting to that level? I mean, David, as a side that are potentially looking like, you should, in my point of view, go up, but looking in that position to be promoted, where do you sit? Like, what are your thoughts on next season? Not getting any of yourselves, but what are you going to do?
No, yeah, I think first of all we got to get promoted in the first place. Just gotta keep going, gotta keep getting that hunter's mentality. But I've always said I want to play against the best possible opposition that I possibly can. I want to test myself against the best, because the only way you can improve, in my opinion, is testing yourself against the best players in the world. Because then you've got a benchmark saying, right, well, this player did this well against this player. But if I do how am I doing against the same player? If I'm doing better or worse, then I can figure out what do I need to improve on? Where do I need to go? And I think in some instances, yes, it's good to drop back down to the Championship. Perfect example of that is Liam Fitzpatrick for Man United. He's dropped back down from Greenbank and he's absolutely killing it in the Championship. He is scoring goals galore for us. He is honestly one of the most respected, well-valued members in our squad, just for his pure finishing aspects. But I believe with a player such as Oscar Smedley, I don't think he needs that. I think it's good to go up into the Championship and say, you know what? So go up into the Premiership and say, you know what? We're going to stay in there. We're going to keep improving. We're going to keep testing ourselves against the best players, because he's had a season in the Championship already. He doesn't need, in my opinion, another season testing himself against the worst players than him. What he needs to do, he needs to test himself against the best and show why he deserves to be in the Premiership and show why he deserves to stay in the top division of English football.
I don't disagree, but on Oscar Smedley particularly, I'd like them to see them be a little bit braver with his utilisation. I think sticking him behind Jack Ewins, who's asked to do all the heavy lifting, completely negates any and all quality that Oscar Smedley has. And that's frustration that I shared following Gameweek 3, is they're not maximising that potential, because that potential is a potential England international in the next 5-10 years.
Yeah, that I agree with. That his utilisation, I do 100% agree with. That they need to switch that up for me.
So I'm happy to kind of retract my statement to say that relegation has just as many positives as staying up, but it does need them to be a little bit braver and go for games, to your point, David. So, no, interesting. We will see. Game week 5, they've got West Bromwich Albion, Greenbank Muscle Warriors, and West Bromwich Albion Throstles. So I suppose the question becomes, do they stick with that defensive approach and try and almost grind it out, or do they take a risk and actually try and win games? Because they've only won once all season, and that came back in game week 2 against Muscle Warriors. Because at some point, something has to change, whether it's this season or next. Otherwise, they're relying on teams below them not catching them up, rather than kind of taking control of their own situation. Let's progress just above the bottom 3. We've got Middlesbrough, and overall a weekend that probably does exactly what it needs to. 4 games, 4 points, a 1-0 defeat to West Bromwich Albion Throstles, a 1-1 draw with Villa Rockets, a 2-0 loss to West Bromwich Albion, and then a really important 1-0 win over GBG Knights. And when you're in that position, looking to put distance between yourself and the teams below you, that is absolutely key. Pick up points where you can, stay competitive in the others, and make sure you take care of the games that matter most, something the teams below them just haven't been able to do. Now, I didn't see loads of Middlesbrough across the weekend, but I think Gregg did, so I will defer to his assessment. But I did watch the Throstles game alongside David, and I'll be honest, I came away a little bit underwhelmed is probably the word I would use. Not necessarily by the result, because 1-0 against Throstles, we know how they play, we know how tight they are, but it was more the manner of the goal they conceded, an indirect free kick. By their own high defensive standards, it felt incredibly soft, and in a game like that where margins are so fine, those moments really matter. Gregg, straight to you to begin with. Give me your assessments on Middlesbrough from game week 4.
Yeah, you're right. I saw a lot of Borough this weekend. I also had a chance to watch that Throstles game because, lo and behold, for the first time in a while, I had a game off and I had a break, and which I obviously can't complain because it's my own doing, but it was nice to be able to sit and watch some Powerchair Football without having to talk about it. And I saw the goal they conceded, and I can't lie, I was sat there saying it to Mitch and Tyler, going, "How on earth has that gone in?" By that, and I mean, I'm being as critical as I can, but I was also saying is their high defensive standards. It was so soft. It was really, really soft. There's no way that should be going in for a team that are so difficult to break down, as Borough always are. It was a real lapse in concentration and judgment. And it cost me in that game, because you get a point out of that and they're even further clear. You know, they're then sort of 3 game results away rather than just the two wins. But they rebounded really well. You know, got a point against a good Villa side this weekend, and they stuck together. You know, we know what you're expecting from Borough. Tough to break down, tough with the dribble. And then they got, the win in the game that mattered. They needed that sort of buffer away from GG Knights, and they've got it now. They look like they're going to secure a place in the Premiership for next season without having to go to a playoff like this last season. They've been a real sort of success story for teams coming from Championship and just keeping their level, keeping themselves away from relegation. Even the West Brom game, it took a couple of moments of quality. The second goal from Zach Dickey especially to undo them, because they were more than matching West Brom and keeping them at bay. So I'm really impressed with Borough. They've got a good core. I'm always a big fan of James Found in goal. He is such an underrated distributor of the ball. For a side that don't often, want or need the goalkeeper to be playing, passes out for the back. Whenever the ball does roll back to him and he's got a bit of time and space, his passing ability is up there, and I think if they wanted to ever transition to a side that did play sort of more expansive football as they get more and more confident in the Premiership, they've got a real good base for Mahoney for James Found, because I think he could play as a second pillar in a 4-out system really well. But yeah, they made it. Thomas Pettigrew made a difference when he came on, got the equaliser against Villa Rockets. Kath Gallsville was immense on the edge of the box defensively and allowing counterattacks. Carl Forster got more game time because there was no Ethan Galloway this weekend, and he showed glimpses of his quality. So yeah, Borough building something nice.
David, you called their game alongside me against Throstles, but importantly, you also faced them recently in the John Good Group WFA Cup. Give me your experience from that and kind of your assessments from Game Week 4.
Oh, that cup game was something that I don't really want to remember, to be honest. We know ourselves. We didn't play the best, and I in particular got quite frustrated. I think Jeff Lewis might be able to tell you about that. And I think it was just a case of they were very calm, consistent. They never really got out of third gear, and they controlled the tempo of the game. And when they were playing against Throssels, it looked like a completely different side that we played. They didn't look very like they were in control. They didn't look like they had the tempo under their belt. It looked like I think it was more how Throssels played rather than how Middlesbrough played. And I think Middlesbrough, in my opinion anyway, they don't need to worry about relegation. I don't think they'll get relegated. Purely the points and the goal difference. They've got roughly 20 less goal difference than GBG Knights. And I just think for the rest of the season, obviously, they want to secure that safety in the Premiership for the 26-27 season. But it's also a case of now maybe experimentation, maybe bringing James Found out a bit, maybe experimenting a bit more with Umar Hanif. He is a quality player. He really is a high quality player. When we played against him, he bossed me bluntly. He properly showed his true quality. I think Middlesbrough just needs to take a chill pill. Obviously, they want to stay up, but just be calm, experiment a bit more.
David D, 2026. Borough, take a chill pill. End the podcast episode there, right? We're done. We're not topping it.
We know how defensively sound Middlesbrough are, how well structured they are, and crucially, unlike the teams below them, they're finding the goals. Not loads of them, not free flowing, but enough. And to David's point, you look at the table, they've got that 6-point buffer over GBG Knights in 10th and an 8-point gap to automatic relegation. So there isn't a world where Middlesbrough aren't playing Premiership football next season. They've done enough. 3 wins, 3 draws, a better goal difference than the teams below them. And it has been that defensive platform that's almost carried them. They are a solid Premiership side. They are difficult to break down. They are competitive in most games, capable of testing anyone on their day. Just ask the likes of Aspire. So the question now becomes, can they be a little bit braver? Because when you look at the teams around them, or above them, Throssels, Villa, Newcastle, there is a gap, but not huge. And if they do want to close it, they're going to have to take a few more risks. But that is the balance, because with bravery comes vulnerability, which is really interesting. An interesting one of Jeff's stats. Middlesbrough historically struggle against Albion teams. So Middlesbrough have lost to both West Bromwich Albion and West Bromwich Albion Throssels. They lost to them both across Gameweek 4. They've played them each 10 times in the National League, losing each of those yet to register a win. The only other team that they've lost 10 times against in the National League is Brighton and Hove Albion.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I was on comms with Al for that, and I quizzed him on it in the comms, and he didn't get to Brighton first.
No, you don't associate Albion with Brighton Hove Albion. Now they have dipped out of the National League. So yeah, a historical stat that Middlesbrough will no doubt want to break. Game week 5 sees Middlesbrough play Muscle Warriors, Greenbank, Sevenoaks and Newcastle United Foundation. I don't think, they certainly won't catch West Bromwich Albion Throssels above them, who have more than double their points. So it's just about ending the season on a high and taking that momentum into 26-27. Next in the standing, we've got West Bromwich Albion Throssels. And to Gregg's point at the start of the podcast, this is where the table really starts to split into tiers. You've got those 3 mini leagues forming, the bottom 4 fighting to survive, a middle pack battling for the positions 5th to 9th, and then you've got the top 4 chasing the title. And Throssell's currently sit right in that middle group, but most definitely trending upwards. Result-wise, it was another strong return, a 1-0 win over Middlesbrough, a 1-0 win over Muscle Warriors. Two tough games on Sunday, a narrow 1-0 defeat to Aspire and a 2-0 loss to Teesside, so 6 points from 4 games. And once again, they're doing it in a very familiar way. They continue to impress me. Their application, their discipline, their structure. This is a very, very good team right now. They're playing with confidence, with togetherness, with clarity in what they're trying to do. As mentioned, 25 points on the board, more than double Middlesbrough directly below them. And that tells you everything about the team and the performances because of that gap created. David, coming to you first. Give me your thoughts on West Bromwich Albion Throstles.
West Brom Throstles are probably one of my favourite teams to watch in the league. I find them they're not over attacking, but at the same time, they're not too defensive. They attack when necessary. They play the right way. They play in a sense they know where their position are in the league. They know what their level is. And I think what makes me love them so much is the difference between this season and last season is remarkable. They were 1 goal away last season from going down the Championship, but now they are thriving in the Premiership. How different could the story be now if they did go down? What would have happened? That is for me, it's just an incredible turnaround. And you've got to give credit to Abby Bolt and Pete Westmoreland for the coaching of the squad. They've shifted the squad from rather trying to play 4 out to back to the traditional 3-1 formation. And that has really got them to have a bit more defensive solidity. And although they often don't win games by much, they only have 1-2-0 margins, some of them. But they just understand who to play in what game and when to turn it on and off.
To answer your question, what they would do in the Championship, assuming they kept this side together, this squad wins the Championship at a canter easily, I would say. Gregg, give me your thoughts from game week 4 for West Bromwich Albion Throstles.
Yeah, just really solid. I mean, like David said, the improvement from this season to last season is just night and day, isn't it, really? I mean, I think for me, what shows the staggering difference, right, in the story of the sort of evolution of Throstles is at one point this season, right? One point this weekend, you had Throstles sitting in 5th and West Bromwich Albion started sitting in 8th. That is unheard of the last however many years. In fact, going back probably all time, West Brom were below their sort of sister club or their what is essentially their secondary team with no threat to Throstles. There were 3 points below, there's 3 places below them. And I had to introduce a game going, welcome to a game between, West Brom and Middlesbrough, where this is 8th versus 9th. And that's more to do with West Brom. But it just shows how tight the league is and how well Throstles are doing.
There is a world this season where both West Bromwich Albion Throstles and Villa Rockets finish above 5-time champions West Bromwich Albion, which I would love to have known the odds you would have got on that coming into the 25-26 campaign.
Powerchair Football betting?
What odds, Paddy? But it's yeah, I think let's say Abigail Bolt deserves a lot of credit for how she's able to coach his side effectively and play at such a high level defensively, and then relieving pressure and going forwards alongside Pete Westmoreland on the sideline. They stick together. They're a tight-knit bunch. They brought in Tom Donahoe to just add that international experience and his quality. And they're just really going about their business, quite understated, I think. David said he's one of it's their favourite, his favourite team to watch, but I think they're just quite happy at the minute, just enjoying their football again. They didn't have the pressure of relegation on them now. They've probably taken a chill pill, to steal David's quote, and they just seem to be thriving at the minute, which is really great to see.
Yeah, they've got 8 wins this season. That's 4 times more than they managed across the entire 24-25 campaign. That alone tells you kind of the scale of this turnaround. But when you look at how those wins come, there's a pattern, and it's a very effective pattern. 7 of their 8 victories this season have come via a 1-0 scoreline. So you know exactly what you're getting, that they are structured, they are disciplined, they get that one goal, and then they shut down the game. And you can ask any team in the division, that is not easy to do, to just completely lock down a game. They recorded, this is pretty crazy, they recorded 4 wins without conceding for the first time in their history. So that shows you everything about where they are and how solid they are. And even when you look at the defeats this weekend, there's context. The 1-0 loss to Aspire, 2-0 defeat to Teesside, dictated by a goal in the opening minute, pretty much. Because beyond that, they stayed in games, they stayed compact, they're incredibly difficult to break down. Defensively, they are built on a very strong foundation. Regan Kemp stands out as someone who consistently pushes the team forward. We've spoken about the connection between Abigail Bolt and Thomas Donahoe. But for me, the unsung hero is Parth Gakwad. He's been an incredibly important piece of the puzzle at the base of their system, often sitting behind Regan. He is disciplined, positionally sound, does all of the unseen work, and he allows everything else to function. And it's a new position for him in 25-26. But I love the fact that he's relied on now because he is a lovely person and he's a very good player. But he won't often get the headlines because he does that unseen work, as mentioned. Now, if we look at game week 5, they play Leeds, Newcastle, West Brom and GBG Knights. Leeds is obviously a huge ask, but those middle bracket games, the Newcastle and the West Bromwich Albion ones, they are the ones that will define where they finish. And to Gregg's point, there is no jeopardy now. They've done enough. They are safe. So they can relax. They can take that chill pill. They can play with more freedom and just take each game as it comes. And if they come away from those fixtures with positive results, particularly against Newcastle and Albion, there's no reason why they can't finish as high as 5th. Which, when you consider where they were last season, finishing 10th, needing a playoff just to be here, it would represent the most ridiculous turnaround, because the important distinction is they haven't recruited heavily. Beyond Thomas Donahoe, this is the exact same squad that finished the 24-25 season. And that is so commendable.
Yeah, and they have, like I said, they've stuck together. They've gone back to the drawing board. They've gone, what do we need to change to be different, to make sure that we're not in the same position as last season? And they are effectively winning games at this level. I think that's a difference. Last season, they were trying to play the really nice attacking football, the beautiful on the eye, but they weren't winning games. It wasn't leading to them picking up points, and it left them, like David said, 1 goal away from going down. Now they've gone, you know what, we're going to sacrifice sometimes how beautiful it may seem on the eye to make sure we get wins, and they are capable of scoring goals that are beautiful, but they don't go overboard, as David says. They get 1-0 up and they go, right, we have something to protect now. Let's be smart. Let's be sensible. And that is the key difference, I think. And like you say, there is a world where they finish 5th this season and I mean, if you just said that at the beginning of the season, I don't think many people would have agreed with you at all. So yeah, long may it continue to them, and congratulations so far for what's been a quite sensational season, because they made it to our game in Teesside. They made it very difficult. Yes, we got the goal within the first 12 seconds, but second half it was, whilst I was in goal and wasn't really tested much at all, I didn't have much to do, they still kept it close, still kept it tight, and that's what they're doing to teams in the minute.
Completely agree. Now let's progress. Next in the standings, we've got Villa Rockets, the Swizzles team of the weekend. Now on paper, 5 points from a possible 12 doesn't immediately justify that. A 1-1 draw with Middlesbrough, a 0-0 with Newcastle, a 1-0 win over Teesside, and then a narrow 2-1 defeat to Greenbank. But it's a conversation we had just before pressing the record button. Anyone that questions that accolade clearly didn't watch them, because I caught 3 of their 4 games on commentary, and they were excellent. And actually, they'll be incredibly frustrated. Those games against Middlesbrough, Newcastle and Greenbank, they should be coming away with far more than just 2 points. But that is how competitive this division is. Gregg, I'll come to you first, because you was on the receiving end of defeat to the hands of Villa Rockets, and I've no doubt you've caught up on some of their other games. A pretty good weekend for them, it has to be said, when you look beyond the numbers.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, a lot has been said about, this Villa side and what they're building. We saw in the cup game against Aspire, they were mighty close to pulling off, a bit of a cup set. Just going down 2-1, and nearly equalised in the 42nd minute to take it to extra time. They are such a defensively solid unit. I said this to them full time after our game. I mean, in the nicest possible way, they are such a pain in the backside. Just defensively, unbelievable. We just couldn't break them down whatsoever. Humsma did, Dave Lewis, Bubba Ali, in particular, with the 3 doing the most defensive graft. Dave was absolutely everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. He locked it up at a dribble, and he is so annoying to get the ball off, and rightfully got his place, in the Swizzles team of the weekend. Roger Hodgson got the goal from the corner. It was an outlet for them in our game. And maybe we possibly thought going into the Greenbank game that maybe they'd put all their effort into the game against us, and that maybe Greenbank would capitalise. No, Villa kept going, and made it close. Arguably, maybe should have had a penalty. They'll feel like they were so close to getting something out of that game as well. I started the weekend with their Borough game, and I thought, a 1-1 draw, with no disrespect to Borough, they were disappointed with that, and they weren't at their best. And then to draw 0-0 with Newcastle, you're thinking, well, how are they going to fare tomorrow? But I knew coming into that Sunday morning game, I knew how difficult they'd be, because we played them in the cup last season. They knocked us out on penalties. When they sit back and defend, they are just monumentally difficult to break down. They've showed so much heart and character to stick together, and that's the main important thing. But brilliant weekend for Villa.
Completely agree, David. We called the game together against Newcastle, and I know you've watched that Teesside game back. Give me your assessments for Villa.
No, Villa really thoroughly deserved that team of the weekend. Really enjoyable to watch. Defensively, they are so resolute, and specifically if we're looking at that Newcastle game, in my opinion, they should have won that game. And I think the Newcastle team would accept that as well. There was a very controversial penalty that you could argue shouldn't have been given in the first place, but then Ollie Crawshaw himself knew. I spoke to him afterwards. He knew himself. He moved early from the penalty spot. But the one thing that makes me quite excited about Villa is because I see a lot of room to grow. if you look at, let's look at Hamza Madir, for example. Currently, right now, he is not using his own chair. He's using a club chair. And if you look at his tyres, they're literally slicks, like an F1 tyre. They are properly, like, knackered tyres. And because it isn't his own chair, when he gets his own chair, you can see him skyrocketing. You can see him really showing the whole league how good he really is, because he's performing unbelievably in not even his own chair. And then let's take another example. Let's take Bobby Allen, for example. Bobby Allen, currently, he's playing through a lot of discomfort right now in his chair. But you just think, when he gets through this period of time of discomfort and can play with the freedom of being comfortable in your own chair, then this squad is looking so balanced with the experience of Bob Ali, Dave Lewis, Rosie Hodgson, Kieran Burns, Nicky Baker, and balance that with the youth and exciting nature of Hamza Madir and Bobby Allen. That is a squad to be reckoned with.
Yeah, I said it pre-season. I wasn't sure how this group would come together, whether the profiles would blend. I couldn't have been more wrong on that. The Teesside game is the standout of their season, the standout potentially ever, because for 40 minutes, as I'm sure Gregg will attest, it was a complete attacking dominance from the champions. Villa barely got out of their own half. You could count on one hand, on a couple of fingers almost, how many meaningful advancements they made up the court. Gregg using, I think, goal the first half, Alistair in the second, just largely spectators for the action in front of you, because everything was happening in the Villa defensive half, the final third almost. But Teesside just couldn't find a way to break them down. Wave after wave of pressure. Teesside tried different rotations, different approaches, different player profiles. They couldn't find a way through. The defensive trio of Hamza Madir, Amir Ali and Dave Lewis was incredible. Disciplined, in sync. And on commentary, I was on my own for it. And obviously, when we have co-commentators, I prompt whoever's alongside me to say their player of the match. And dangerously, I think it was the 39th or so minute, I said, there isn't a world where Dave Lewis isn't the player of the match in this game. He has been so good. He has been so assured. He has just shepherded the edge of that box. But there was still continual waves of pressure from Teesside. So I said, this could come back to bite me. Then, out of nowhere, the game flips. Dave carries them up the court, wins the corner. The first delivery is dealt with by Tyler Reeve. The second one arrowed into the box, and Rosie Hodgson catches it so cleanly, 1-0. And almost immediately after the restart, the full-time whistle was blown. So from being under pressure for the entire game to taking all 3 points is potentially one of the most incredible, remarkable games I've ever seen, but also could be one of the most important results in the title race, as I can see from Gregg's face. Then it was a short break, and then straight back for their final game against Greenbank, and it was a very similar pattern. Villa absorb pressure, they stay in the game, they go again in the second half at 0-0. No substitutes from either side, both teams back in their structure, and then once again Rosie Hodgson with the breakthrough. This time capitalising on a little bit of miscommunication in the Greenbank defence, and at that point you're thinking, there is a potential that Villa takes 6 points from 2 title challengers in Teesside and Greenbank. But the Liverpool-based side just had a response. Marcus Harrison steps up when it matters most, finding the equaliser. Then Jacob Buckplatt converted from a penalty late on to turn the game around. There was appeals as to the penalty, but it was absolutely correct. Hamza Madir was just a slightly careless reversing into Marcus Harrison. But again, look at the performances. They're not being outplayed. They are not being overrun. They're competing in long spells against teams far above them in the Premiership standings. Dave Lewis rightfully in the fantasy team of the weekend. And honestly, you could have seen Hamza Mahdi and Amir Ali feature in that as well, and it wouldn't shock many people. I echo what David said about Hamza Mahdi and his chair, and Bobby Allen and his current discomfort. Once those are ironed out, it's a scary prospect, and we could see them go on a real push. Heading into game week 5, Sevenoaks Muscle Warriors, West Bromwich Albion, and Newcastle United Foundation. And there's a real opportunity here, because if they maintain that defensive level and become slightly more clinical, they could absolutely finish towards the top of that middle bracket in 5th. And based on what we saw in game week 4, you would potentially have them good value for it. And more broadly, you boys are welcome to chip in. End of season awards is going to be so unpredictable this season. In seasons gone by, you tend to know with about a 90% certainty who is picking up certain awards, the individual, the coach, the teams, etc. I don't know where it lands this year, because there's so many interesting stories, irrelevant of where you look in the division, irrelevant of what tier of 4 teams you're looking at, because I'm definitely considering one of either Villa or Throttles as my team of the season.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Greg.
No, go on, David. You go first, man.
No, I've been thinking about this for a while, and when I vote at the end of the season, who my team of the season would be, I'm going to probably vote Throttles, but just because of the vast improvement that they've made, it's just ridiculous, really.
I think for me, what you see with the end of season awards is sometimes a game week 5 recency bias, just because it's fresh in the mind. You struggle to think back to times gone by before that, and I think also sometimes you can see bias towards the team that ends up winning the division.
There's no doubt that individual accolades often tend to be tied and linked to the team accolades and the eventual placements of each of the 12 teams. But I will say that's something that I have worked to try and iron out in seasons gone by. So now we take the award voting from every single game week through the Swizzles Awards, and that contributes to 50% of the eventual outcome. So then the other 50% is dictated by the public vote, so to speak. So it somewhat takes that recency bias out of it, but that no doubt has a massive impact.
Well, that's good for one. And I think it's hard when you look at the definition of team of the season. Naturally, your thoughts go to, well, the team that won the division must therefore be the team of the season. No. But there is so much more to it, and context-wise, and what the difference in transition from where they were the season before to where they are now, or what they've been through to what they're doing now, their achievements this season. So, yeah, it is more wide open this year than it certainly has been for, and possibly a number of years. And that again only shows just how well our sport is growing and how much the talent pool is diversifying and being more spread out. Villa would be good money to finish top of that mini league. Yes, they've played a game more than West Brom, so they've got to overcome that. But obviously, they play West Brom and have arguably favourable fixtures in game week 5. So, yeah, great weekend for Villa, and they'll be absolutely over the moon.
Just on that point about individual success being tied up with team achievements, it is worth referencing the fact that Teesside Steel, who finished 3rd in the Championship last season, pretty much swept up a lot of the individual awards, Oscar Mulgrew, and the coaches as well. So it doesn't always go the way you expect it to, but I think it goes without saying, both in the Premiership and Championship, this end of season awards is going to be the most unpredictable ever. And I don't think there will be any complaints if one of Villa and or Throttles win that eventual team of the season. but then you can see it go into a title winner because, as we will come on to discuss, the 4 teams currently vying it out for that top spot, if they're going to do it, they're going to have to do it the hard way because they all face one another in very condensed fixtures across game week 5, and that alone probably merits a vote on someone's behalf. Now let's progress to West Bromwich Albion in the standing to a 6th. And on paper from game week 4, it was 6 points from a possible 12. They opened the weekend with a 3-0 defeat to Leeds, followed by a 3-1 loss to Aspire. Sunday saw a strong response with a 2-0 win over Middlesbrough before finishing with a 2-1 comeback victory against Muscle Warriors. So 2 wins, 2 defeats, a mixed weekend in terms of results, but one that probably had a little bit more to it once you dig a little bit deeper. Gregg, give me your thoughts on West Bromwich Albion from game week 4.
I don't really know where to go with this, to be honest, because it's weird, isn't it, to be talking about West Brom, A, this far down the table, and B, with not a lot of sort of clear-cut, obvious sort of positives to take, because yes, they obviously came back from behind against Muscle Warriors and they got the victory against Middlesbrough. If we're being honest, this is, I mean, a 2-1 victory over Muscle Warriors going behind is poor for West Brom. Regardless of what this West Brom team is compared to team years gone by, the quality they have, and obviously we prayed Muscle Warriors to the high heavens at the beginning. They'll be so disappointed with that. They'll be pleased they at least came back to get the victory. But I think for me, their issue is twofold. I think they played a bit. I called the Aspire game, called the score correctly, by the way. Just saying, throwing that out there. 3-1, was buzzing with that. But it's defensively, the goals were poor. They were soft from my point of view. There's the free kick one that opened up the scoring is just a ball from Dan McLean to John Bowley, edge of the box. He just 180 it through a gap between Chris Corn and the defender, and it's soft because what do you expect? What else are you expecting apart from a ball to John Bowley to 180 it? They concede straight away after half time, and it's a lovely move. Dan McLean reversion down the line, 180 it across, John Bowley front bumpers. But for me, the 2 wingers on the outside, I think, if I remember correctly, it was Harry Bestwick and Brad Bates at that point. They're not quick enough to react to get into the wall to cut that ball out from between McLennan and Boulding, or there's no one marking John Boulding. And John Boulding is not a player you leave unmarked. You do so at your peril. And it just struck me as defensively they're a little bit lapsing sometimes on the edge of the box. They show good stuff going forward at times. There is still that DNA. Some of the goals they scored this weekend were lovely. I mean, I called the Borough game. Zach Dickey, his second goal is absolutely superb. Fakes a 90, goes into a full spin instead to start it in the near post. It's quality. And there is nice moments because that also had good front pickoffs from Brad Bates. Harry Bestwick has some good front but he scored the goal against the Spurs. Great finish. There's aspects there, but they're a team that are building, and from a team that has been challenging at the top. They're obviously a team in transition, and they just have to stick together, not get too frustrated with how it's going, because Chris Gordon is doing a lot of the heavy lifting at times, but it just remains to be seen how they transition into that next season.
David, I don't think you called any of their games on commentary, but I have no doubt you've watched some of their action back. Give me your assessments from what you've seen.
No, yeah, with West Brom, unfortunately, I did not get to commentate on any of their games this weekend, but I think I was on Court A when they were playing Leeds at their first game of the weekend, and I just heard this commotion constantly. There was so much action in that game. It was ridiculous. There was red cards, there was own goals, there was quality finishes. And I think with West Brom, it's a case of that many people and individuals are comparing them to the squad that they were a few years ago. The 23-24 squad was ridiculous. It was absolutely stacked. They had Valentino Zagarelli, Marcus Harrison, Dylan Kelsall, 3 players that made them one of the best squads that the National League has ever seen. And the difference is they aren't that anymore. They aren't that team with absolute stack full of international talent. They're in a rebuilding phase where they've got to go back to basics. They're going to maybe recruit from within and go back to what they know they're good at, which is moving the ball around teams, moving the ball in a way in which teams cannot cope with them. And I think it's training people up, such as Ollie Rock, Lucas Chrysler, Harry Bestwick, to play in the West Brom way. And it may seem negative on the surface of this weekend, but I'm hoping that if they've got a very difficult game week 5, really, really challenging. They've got GW United, which they hope to get points from, then they've got yourselves, Gregg, with Teesside, then Leeds, and then Villa and Throssels. So they will be expecting to get points from that weekend, but it's more for next season. Where they want to finish next season? What are their aspirations for next season?
Exactly that. Just on that 23-24 squad, I've said on the podcast before that starting 4 of Chris, Marcus, Dylan and Valentino is the only starting squad that can match or potentially better the current team we're seeing with Leeds. And for me, they're probably the 2 best squads, starting 4 certainly, that we've ever seen in the National League Premiership. So, no, it's right to reference that because it's a stark contrast from what we're seeing in 25-26. Just to break down that Leeds game in a little bit more detail, it was a very uncharacteristic way to concede within 45 seconds, something you don't associate with Chris Gordon's sides. But beyond that early goal, I actually thought West Brom were not only very competitive, but were probably the better of the 2 teams. Now, the big talking point on commentary for myself and Charlie was Chris went with arguably his most inexperienced lineup. He was paired with Lucas Chrysler in the centre, Ollie Rock on one wing, Harry Bestwick wide on the other, which left Zach Dickey, Matt Gilbert and Brad Bates on the bench. And it definitely caught us off guard, but I have been one of the loudest voices saying that you have to start to trust these young players. You have to expose them to these environments, to these high pressure games to accelerate that learning. Because if they're going to have to learn the 4-out system, why not do it when there isn't any jeopardy? There isn't a title to challenge for. There is no real risk. So even if the game ends up seeing them see defeat, there's more positives in putting those players in those environments than there is negatives. But that being said, once the changes came on, once the experience was introduced, Zach Dickey in the first half, then Brad Bates and Matt Gilbert in the second, the game completely shifted. West Brom became aggressive, more physical, more confrontational. They started to disrupt Leeds' rhythm. They frustrated them. They dragged them into a game they didn't want to play. It got very heated, very scrappy. And that's probably exactly what West Brom wanted. Zach Dickey, particularly in that first half, had a real battle on his hands with Dylan Kelsall, picked up 2 yellows. The first one almost felt like a statement, announcing himself that he was there. The second, slightly careless. And that red card, the first ever of his Powerchair Football career, which blew my mind. It completely tilted the game back in Leeds' favour. And then the second and third goals are just a result of that player advantage. So it was 3-0 on paper, of course, but in reality, far more competitive than the scoreline suggests. The Aspire game followed, similar pattern, an early goal, momentum gone. Suddenly you're chasing again against a side in that kind of form. It's incredibly difficult to recover from. But again, they stayed in it. They never looked like they were completely overwhelmed. And Aspire, if they don't lift the Premiership title come season's end, it will be very much a disappointment. Sunday, 2-0 win over Middlesbrough, a really strong result when you consider how structured and disciplined they are and how hard they are to break down. And then Muscle Warriors, I haven't actually watched it back, but I'll have to do that. Going behind early on via Rick and Shah, there's a lot of pressure there, but Zach Dickey steps in, equalises just before half-time, and then again right before the end. 2 goals at probably the most important times of the game, and that probably sums up West Brom's weekend. It's not perfect, it's not necessarily consistent, but they're still capable of stepping up in key moments and getting the job done.
I think for me, this weekend, we saw a transition in Zach Dickey a little bit. After that Leeds game, where, so for context, I was playing on court 8 at the time, I heard a monumental yell from Zach Dickey, like, big come on, get in. And I just very quickly looked over, because we think we just scored, between the gap, because there was a gap in the middle between court A and court B. And I could see all the players huddled together celebrating, and I just automatically assumed that West Brom had equalised. I said to players, West Brom have equalised, it's 1-1, good for us, happy days. Turns out that was just to win a penalty that was then ultimately missed. And he obviously then got sent off, because I think he got a yellow card. Jeff had a word with him about being a bit over the top with the celebrations, penalties. And from that game onwards, for the next 3 across the weekend, it wasn't as vocal, wasn't loud, wasn't as like, here we go. And as we saw in game week 3, and it almost worked in his favour a little bit, because his impact on the wing, especially, got goal against Borough, 2 against Muscle Warriors. They both came from set pieces, by the way. It was almost a different side to him. I've never. Complete contrast from game week 3 run.
I've watched him, of course, with the United States national team at the World Cup in Sydney. I've watched him in Paris as part of the Fit for Powerchair Football World Cup, where he was part of the Western Sydney Wanderers squad, and now with West Bromwich Albion in the National League. And to your point, he is very vocal. He is so loud. He is so commanding. He makes himself known. But he was incredibly muted in comparison across game week 4. But on the flip side, just to echo you, it's the highest level performances I've ever seen him produce for club or country, the highest level of technical work. And it's a real shame that he had to observe that 1-game suspension against Aspire of all teams, because with him present, it's a night and day difference when they have him on the court. So no, I completely agree. But just to go back to what I said, there's no title push here, that's gone. But there's definitely something to build on. To David's point, there's a bit more edge to them. There's a bit more intent. And if they can carry that into game week 5 and beyond, particularly into the cup, then there could be success to be had in this season. But currently, West Brom are extremely likely to have their worst ever season in the National League. They've never finished below 4th. I very much doubt they're going to catch Greenbank up in game week 5. And on game week 5, they play West Bromwich Albion, Throssels, Leeds, GBG Knights, and Villa Rockets. So we'll see what version of them comes to Nottingham. Now, next in the standing, we've got Newcastle United Foundation in 5th, who sit just above West Brom in the standings, albeit having played a game more. They opened the weekend with a tough fixture against title-chasing Greenbank and were ultimately beaten 2-0. That was followed by a 0-0 draw with Villa Rockets before a strong Sunday showing where they picked up 2 wins, 2-0 against CBG Knights and 2-0 against Sevenoaks. So 7 points from a possible 12, a really solid return, and one that probably reflects a side that quietly went about their business across the weekend. David, give me your thoughts on Newcastle United Foundation.
Yeah, I think Newcastle, another team like West Brom, who are again in a rebuilding phase, in the fact that obviously it's well known and well documented that they did lose Ethan Fisher to Leeds in the summer transfer window. And I think it's just the adaptation. Ollie Crawshaw now playing, as obviously wearing the goalkeeper shirt, but now playing in the middle. But I think they're looking like a really good side. 7 points from a 12-point weekend. That's really good for a mid-table side. Considering that they faced Greenbank in their weekend, that was their only loss of the weekend. Considering Greenbank are in a title fight still, and I was the commentator for their 0-0 draw with Newcastle and Villa Rockets with you, Ryan, and I thought they weren't unbelievable, but one thing that I would like to highlight is Ollie Crawshaw's defensive ability and defensive capabilities. He is so solid at the back, like a brick wall. Honestly, nothing goes in the Newcastle net without it having to go through Ollie Crawshaw first, and he's so highly regarded by the Newcastle players around him. And he, as you highlighted again earlier, Ryan, if he doesn't represent England, something has gone terribly wrong.
He is destined to adorn that 3-line shirt at some point in his Powerchair Football career. He is an incredible talent, and I'll come on to him in just a second. Gregg, give me your thoughts on Newcastle. I think you called one of their games against Greenbank, but beyond that, I think I had all other 3 of their games. It's just a solid return and quietly efficient, don't you think?
Well, thank goodness you said that, because I was about to sit there and go, well, I didn't see any of their action this weekend, and yada, yada, yada. Yeah, I'm quietly understated of going about their business this weekend. For a side that lost Ethan Fisher and are going through transition, to be 5th in the table going into Gameweek 5, I think they'd be over the moon with that, really. But I echo your points about Ollie Crawshaw. I am the biggest fan of his game. I honestly would go to the point of saying, over the last 12 months, I don't think we've seen a better development in a player in the National League than Ollie Crawshaw. Going from having to play out wide as a winger, with Ethan Fisher delivering the balls to him, to now stepping up, captaining the side, playing in the middle, having to do a lot of the defensive work that he won't be shy admitting 12 months ago. He didn't like it, didn't like playing in goal, didn't like the defensive work. He enjoyed playing up wide, scoring the goals. He now has to do the nitty-gritty, defending expertly well. His distribution in the middle is unbelievable, by the way. He is finding passes left, right and centre to his wingers. I'm a massive, massive fan of his. I think the other thing that also needs to be mentioned about Newcastle was the arrival of Emily Davey. Getting a goal as well, I believe, in a National League debut weekend, Premiership. Coming on from the RETP, stepping up to the Premiership. Really, really exciting future for her. I think that was great to see as well, wasn't it, Rad?
It certainly was. I will most definitely highlight her weekend in just a moment. Did you have something to say, David?
Yeah, it's just what I was going to say is it's not often that you find that you go straight from a regional league talent straight to the Premiership. You often find that they take it in steps. Like they go to the Regional League, then the Championship, then the Premiership. Nope, she's just completely skyrocketed through the Championship. Doesn't even need to step a foot in that division. Just goes straight to the Premiership and is performing against some of the best teams in the division.
Yeah, I will highlight her in just a second, but just to go back to a few of your points, Ollie Crawshaw, we've had a debate on several episodes recently about cloning players, about their versatility. He's got to be right up there. If you was to have 4 Ollie Crawshaws on a team, you are challenging for the title, because no matter where you play him, no matter what role he's asked to perform, he does it to a division-leading standard. And it was that game against Villa Rocket. It was very much a reactive, defensive performance from the Newcastle captain, but he completely nullified their attack and limited their attacking involvement. It was a good point for Newcastle in the end, however, because I think David alluded to it earlier. There was a penalty late on that was saved by Ollie Crawshaw, but 2 elements. It shouldn't have been a penalty at all. If anything, I think it should have been a foul on or a free kick for Newcastle. And then the penalty itself, Ollie Crawshaw is probably moving 30 seconds before the ball is struck, which is slightly disappointing that the referees didn't pick up on that due to their placement. But that's the reality. Sometimes things get overlooked.
Here's a question I'd love to ask Jeff, the stat man. When was the last time we saw 3 penalties saved in a Premiership weekend?
I think that will probably be hard to track because we don't necessarily register missed penalties.
Yeah,
and
point.
all of his stats are relying on the goals, the assists, the points, the wins, etc. But he will be listening, and if there is a will, there is a way.
To my because I questioned him during our game against Brussels and said, "Oh, was that the quickest goal we've scored? Or scored the National League for a while?" Turns out I was wrong because Baggy's got like conceded one within 8 seconds of Forest to Nottinghamshire in the Championship. But to my point, there's a lot of debate around penalties, isn't there? In the Powerchair Football world about can the keepers move, where we're taking the penalty from, because it's always in favour of the attacker. We've seen Chris Gordon have one saved and then saved one. He saved one from Dan McClellan. Ollie Crawshaw saved one as well. That's 3. I can't remember if there was a 4th or not, but it just shows the level of the goalkeeping.
I would like to see the penalties taken from 4.5 meters away. So not the full 5 meters to the edge of the box, but the gap between the penalty spot and the edge of the box. I think it needs that. And don't get me wrong, I know in any form of football, the penalty needs to always favour the attacking player. That doesn't necessarily take it out of their grasp, but I just think the penalties is something that definitely can be refined within the laws of the game.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't like we saw it, didn't we, in Paris, the Champions Cup, and Sydney for the World Cup. Some of the whole goalkeeper moving and you could dummy and feint a penalty. It was a farce. It was. I mean, it took Marcus Harrison about a couple of minutes to take a penalty in the Champions Cup in Paris, and it just wasn't a good look for the sport at all. So I agree. Don't go the full 5 meters. Bring it back a little bit, because that means it still favours the attacker because the goalkeeper shouldn't be saving it. But any penalty that is not hit correctly is going to be saved. And it does mean you have to put it right in the corner.
You think that would be a decent distinction, David, taking it to 4.5 meters?
Yeah, I think it would be good. But the only problem, and you can't do anything about it, just because of the way Powerchair Football is, the goalkeeper can always read which way the ball, which corner the ball's going in. That's just the nature of the chair. You can't do anything. But if you compare it to something like regular football, the keeper doesn't know which way you're going to dive. So the penalty, which way you're going to put the ball in which corner. So he has to almost make a 50-50 guess. So yes, I think moving it back would make it better, but it's just getting that perfect distance where it's like a 70-30 odd for the player.
Yeah.
'Cause you don't want it to be like now, where it's literally 95-5. If the player scuffs the penalty, then he saves it. It's more, you want it to be show the keeper's excellence as well.
And that's the point that I think made is, yes, we saw 3 penalties saved, but one of them Ollie's already admitted he moved early, and the other 2 were scuffed, so the keeper didn't really have to do a lot to save them.
The goalkeepers have to try their luck, otherwise it will be impossible to save. So you can understand the likes of Ollie Crawshaw and others just being ready and primed to save that penalty kick. We saw it in the WFA Cup on Monday, and how there was some complaints from Leeds that Jacob Buck-Platt jumped early in prevention of Lewis Harris's penalty. But in comparison to Ollie Crawshaw's penalty against Villa, Jacob Buck-Platt is still as a statue. Honestly, I can understand the appeals from Villa Rockets, because it's the most blatant advancement prior to a ball being struck I've probably ever seen. But I don't blame Ollie Crawshaw for trying it. But anyway, we digress. Back to Newcastle United Foundation. Saturday challenging. Sunday, once again, though, was all about Ollie Crawshaw. He was everywhere. We joke about things like heat maps on commentary, but if and when that comes a reality, which hopefully isn't too far away when you look at the advancements we're making with streaming, he's the type of player that you'll genuinely see light up the entire court. His coverage, his reading of the game, his ability to impact both defensively and in the transition, it's top level. He's destined for England. I'll say it once again. The question, however, that I posed to a few people on commentary was the question of fit. He's operating in that goalkeeper role, and you can see similarities with Ethan Fisher, with Chris Gordon. But does that versatility help or hinder him when Adam McAvoy and Craig Peaty are thinking about his potential inclusion in the side?
It reminds me so much of Dan Rigby when you're speaking about the versatility of a player. That Dan Rigby can play in any position, and that, in a sense, hinders him, because the England coaches don't know where his best position is. Where does he fit into that England squad? And you can see the same with Ollie Crawshaw. Is it a situation where he has to make it clear what his favourite position is, and he has to make it clear where he wants to be played?
What classification is Ollie? Can someone remind me?
2, PF2.
So obviously that does in some ways dent his chances of progressing through that England team in the short-term future, and that's probably where Adam McAvoy and Craig Peaty may nod towards Dan Rigby, who has that versatility and that PF1 classification as well. It's just an interesting debate that I had across the weekend.
2 points. I've literally just watched back the penalty. Mike Wordy moves early.
Yeah.
2, I think I can speak to this situation more than most, given I think I find myself in a similar situation, and it's a debate I've had with myself and the coaching staff a lot over the last 12 to 24 months, is working out where my best spot is at breaking into the squad, because
You're in that exact same bracket, aren't you?
I am. I mean, I didn't want to be the only one to bring myself up, but you've both just gone straight to Ollie and Dan, so I'm going to go, hello, I'm still here. I am in that boat, and it's a conversation I had with Craig at the last camp of, if I'm going to break into the squad at some point again, where is it going to be? Because for T-side, when I play in goal, it's very much on the goal line, defending, not playing 4 out, and then I'm playing out wide. Whereas for the development squad, I'm often, yes, I play out wide sometimes, but more often than not, I'm playing as a goalkeeper in a 4 out. And it's something I've always said of my versatility. I've always considered it a bonus and a positive, but where is it I need to focus my attention? And it's something, Ryan, you say often, is many people say I'm best in goal, but you think I'm better off out wide. And it is tough, because you want to have that versatility. You don't want to lose that, because at a club level, it's a bonus, but you need to have that identification of the clear focus and goal of a position and then what you need to work on in that position to break into the senior squad.
And that's the thing. I think that versatility helps you at club level, but not necessarily country level, because you could very much stick most of the England squad in any of the 4 positions, and they would do a good job. But they're almost Chris is never not going to adorn that goalkeeper jersey. John is never not going to play in the centre. We've spoken at length about how versatile Dan McClellan is and how his future could be in the centre, yet he will never play there in a competitive game in an England shirt because of the players that are already there. So whilst the versatility helps you at club level, that versatility is never going to be called upon if and when you're wearing an England shirt. So I think it's probably better for the likes of yourself, Dan Rigby, Ollie Crawshaw, to shore up a position. And that's why I wonder whether him now wearing that goalkeeper shirt has that in mind. He wants to take the shirt off Chris Gordon's back. He wants to be the heir to his throne, as we currently see Ethan Fisher to be.
The thing is that I think with players like training to become middlemen and to become goalkeepers, and they want to break into the England squad, there's only 2 positions there's only 1 goalkeeper and there's only 1 middleman and there's 2 wingers. Therefore, in the squad, you need more wingers than you do middlemen. That's just the nature of how it is. So surely, if you're from Ollie Crawshaw's perspective, if he sees his likelihood of getting into the England squad, because currently, Chris and John I don't think they're going anywhere at the moment. And I think there's a lot more wingers in the squad than middlemen. I mean, I just think surely it'd be your best opportunity if you want to go on the wing to get to try and, you get what I'm trying to say, basically.
100%. I think you're right. Chris and John are going at nowhere. I think we're all at the minute underneath that, fighting for spots in that next generation. Selfishly, I'd say Ollie, Duke out wide, mate. That means there's less competition for me in the middle. But I think he has that ability to play anywhere, and it just is a conversation of where he wants to play and where he sees, and he and the coaching staff see best fit for breaking into squads. But there is a lot of competition places vying underneath, that next generation of who's going to step up and take the shirts when those that have been there for the entirety no longer are. It's a debate we could have for the next 2 hours.
Yeah, and we are now 2 hours into this podcast. But I think the one takeaway has to be, irrelevant of some of these challenges and these questions, Ollie's destined for England, isn't he? So it's all momentum ahead. Let me go back to the recap, because as to Gregg's point, we have these offshoot conversations sometimes and we get lost in the debate. But I do want to bring it back to Emily Davey, just 13 years old, coming into the National League squad, not just making up the numbers either. She's earned her place. Jamie Harrison doesn't hand out minutes. If you're in that team, you've earned it. And she has. I've worked with her recently at the Regional Emergent Talent Programme in the North, and I was so impressed. And this is someone who's played all of her football at Regional League level. I think she's played 1 cup game recently against Altrincham. But beyond that, nothing near to the level of the National League Premiership, which we're saying is a complete standard above what you're seeing in the Championship. She hasn't ever experienced that level. And at times she was matching, if not outperforming, some of her peers who are far more experienced. Her goal against GBG Knights was fully deserved. She strikes the ball so cleanly. And once she adjusts to the pace and the demands of this division, there is huge potential there. And without putting too much pressure on her, I truly believe she has the potential to become one of the leading female players in the game if that development continues. I've never seen a female player at the age of 13 do what she has done. And that's within 1 weekend. And it's not, I know it's within limited minutes, but it's the application, it's the drive. and it's the early signs. So a huge congratulations to her. Jamie Harrison did say she may feature in game week 5 of the competition, but I think he fast-tracked her introduction after a very successful cup debut. Cole Simpson was another who caught the eye, incredibly busy, operating across multiple roles in game week 4. To be a little bit more critical, I think he needs a little bit more clarity in his final action, whether that's the pass, the shot, because that end execution sometimes can be off. And I also liked what they did with Lee Armstrong. At times they pushed him forward, and that's something I'd like to see them do a little bit more. Just a bit more experimentation and a bit more freedom.
Only thing I would say is just to give Cole a bit of leniency. I don't think he's played a lot of football recently because he has been rather unwell. So I think he was just coming back to Premiership football. He had missed a regional league at a development camp day in a couple of weeks beforehand.
Can I just preface to say that because he's part of the National Emerging Talent Squad and he has aspirations of being in the England development squad, I hold him to a higher standard now, and I have to weave in some of the negatives. But he still had a very good, very solid weekend. But he needs brilliant weekends consistently if he is to force his way into the England development squad, which is not out the realm of possibility at all. But just more broadly on Newcastle, just like a lot of the teams in and around them, there's no jeopardy, there's no pressure of a title race, and I think they're actually really enjoying that. We said at the start they've gone under the radar this weekend, and I think it absolutely suits them because they are rebuilding, they're evolving, they're trying different things and quietly picking up points while doing it. So overall, really solid weekend, and sets it up nicely for the 5th and final weekend in a couple of weeks' time, where they play West Bromwich Albion, Throssels, Teesside, Leeds and Middlesbrough. Now we move into the top bracket of 4 teams, and Greenbank sits right at the bottom of it, but only by 2 points, 41 points from their 18 games played. And I think that alone tells you everything about this division. You're talking about a side that came into the weekend in incredible form, riding momentum from game week 3, where they swept up all of the individual and team awards, through to the cup game where they knocked out Leeds, and yet 1 defeat, 1 slip, and there's a gap. They opened the weekend perfectly, 7-0 win over Sevenoaks, dominant, ruthless, exactly what you would expect from a title contender. 2-0 win over Newcastle United Foundation, who we've just spoke about at length as being so defensively sound, and how much of an effort it needs to kind of work the ball around Ollie Crawshaw. Again, it was controlled, professional. 6 points from their 2 games on Saturday, and you're thinking this is a team that could very easily lift the title. But Sunday morning, the feel-good factor and the wave sadly evaporated with a 2-1 defeat to Leeds before a narrow 2-1 win over Villa. Greg, give me your assessment of Greenbank.
Yeah, it's one of those where this division is so tight, especially the 4 at the top. 1 slip and 1 lack of concentration, or 1 mistake, or 1 chance not taken can have all the difference. And I think for Greenbank, obviously, the debate coming into the weekend was they'd already played 1 or 2 more games than everyone else around them. So yes, they had the points, but they'd played more games, and so they needed to be perfect, almost, to keep themselves in that title race, or at least keep them more in their hands than perhaps it is now, because I think we all circled it before the weekend, didn't we? That Leeds Greenbank game on Sunday morning. I made sure I was definitely on commentary for it. No way I was missing that one. After watching Monday night and how different the game was, Leeds weren't anywhere near the level on Monday night that they were on Sunday. And I think I spoke about it in the build-up. I said, that could be, is that down to, cup football, 8 o'clock kick-off in the evening, away from home, a court you're not used to, a court that some people have complaints about. I've never played there, so I can't comment. It's it's one of those that Leeds just were a cut above Greenbank in that game. They just were, and Greenbank had momentum coming into it. They were just really, really clinical against Sevenoaks. 7-0. They put more goals past them than both Leeds and ourselves, the Teesside, combined. So it just shows the level they're able to achieve. But they just got it wrong. Marcus Houston said he got it wrong tactically afterwards. And I don't want to highlight this Leeds game too much, but it is obviously the game that just has the biggest impact on the title race and the ambitions of both sides going into the final weekend of the season, because it now leaves them 2 points behind, having played a game more than everyone else above them. So they're relying on other teams dropping points to keep themselves in that title run and hope that they can get their hands on it at the end of the season. But yeah, I think regardless of whatever happens at the end of the season, there's massive positives for Greenbank. The development of Jacob Buck-Platt into one of the best players in that squad, if not one of the most promising young players in the division, another one who will, without a doubt, put on an England senior jersey at some point.
He's another Ollie Crawshaw, isn't he? Who is incredibly versatile. You'd be happy to play him in any of the 4 positions and he would do a solid job. And I completely echo that England element. And just on the Leeds game briefly before I throw to David, they were the first to admit they got the game plan wrong. And that for me is more important than anything, because Marcus was going, if we set up this way, if we did this differently, there's no way we lose that game. And so often we've seen teams coming off the back of a loss, perplexed. They don't know how or what they would have done differently in hindsight. But that wasn't the case with Greenbank, which shows how fine the margins are. And if you gave them the opportunity to play that game again shortly after, I don't think you see that same scoreline. David, you didn't call any of Greenbank's games across game week 4, but I have no doubt you was tuning into some of them, most particularly that game against Leeds. Give me your thoughts from what you saw.
Yeah, I think with Greenbank, there is an expectation from everyone around the club, not just the club, sorry, everyone around in the league, that they should be doing better than what they are. I think we just have to remind ourselves that they have only just been promoted. They were promoted 2 seasons ago. Jacob Buck-Platt, his potential is ridiculous. I remember playing in the Championship against him a few seasons ago. Even then, he was stupidly good. He was a level above everyone else, and you can see he's getting these traits from Marcus, just the ball control, the way he can glue a ball to his chair and drive his team on the pitch and play almost in that Chris Gordon role for his own side. And he is one for the future. He is one that you will say, yeah, he will definitely be representing for his country. And they may, Greenbank themselves, but they may see it as a disappointment that, you know what, we might be a bit out of the title race now. But it reminds me a lot of my club, Manchester United, after game week 3. They had a lot of, the teams around us had games in hand on us. Had games in hand on us. And although we had more points than them, if they won their games in hand, they would have gone above us. The question is, would you rather have games in hand or would you rather have points on the board? And for me personally, I would always have points on the board.
It's the age-old debate, and one that Gregg and I had just a week ago when we was talking about the Premiership, and I echo you. I said exactly that. I'd rather have points on the board because we've seen teams slip up when they've got them games advantages. And as we will come on to talk about the 3 teams above Greenbank, all of them have 5 fixture weekends in game week 5. And if I'm chasing a title, I do not want that. I want a condensed 4 fixture weekend where you can focus on quality more than quantity. I didn't actually catch a great deal of Greenbank's games on Saturday. I actually didn't cover any of them, but I did see both of them on Sunday. Villa was a strange one. Maybe they were carrying some frustration from that defeat to Leeds, because firstly they were struggling to break Villa down, which many have experienced this season. They do go behind. They're under pressure. Villa are defending brilliantly, and for long periods it looked like they would potentially lose 2 games in a row. But where there's a will, there's a way. And Marcus Harrison had a pretty special weekend, if you take that Leeds defeat out of consideration, because he just takes control. He equalises in that one and then finds a way to win the penalty soon after, which is dispatched perfectly by Jacob Platt to secure the 3 points. And they really do rely on him and put the trust in him in them penalty kicks, which is fantastic to see, that a player of Jacob's age doesn't seem phased with that responsibility. They do sit 2 points behind the teams above them, but crucially, as mentioned, they have played a game more. But 5 fixture weekends have often been the kryptonite of title challenges, and Greenbank, unlike the other 3, have a kinder schedule. So we shall see. They still have to face Teesside and Aspire. So whilst they might not be able to control their own destiny entirely, they could absolutely dictate the outcome of this title race, depending on how those results go. I'll never say never, but they now know that the margin for error is gone. And if they are going to have a chance of lifting the title, however unlikely, they need to win all 4 of their remaining games. I think that goes without saying. Marcus Harrison did feature in the fantasy team of the weekend, and rightfully so. I will say that Torbjorn Krarup didn't necessarily hit the same heights we saw in game week 3, a little quieter, and similarly Jacob Platt as well didn't quite impose himself in the same way we've seen. But again, the standard we're judging them against is so much higher than on seasons gone by. I think Luke Kelly will be a little bit frustrated as well. Didn't have his best game against Leeds, missed a few chances against Villa, and defensively could have done better when he was adorning that goalkeeper shirt. But that being said, it's a huge congratulations to Luke Kelly, who registered his 100th career goal versus Sevenoaks, 86 in the league, 14 in the club. He's also the only player to have scored 20 plus goals for 4 different teams. Gregg, who are the 4 teams?
Oh, the 4 teams. Oh, good heavens.
You can chip in as well, David.
Man United.
Man United is one of them.
West Brom. Did you get 20 for West Brom?
He got 23 for West Brom. So Greenbank, Manchester United, West Brom. Can we get the 4th?
Oh, hang on. This is going to be...
Is it Sale?
It is Sale United. Well done, David. So to your former side, he managed to get exactly 20 goals for. But the only player to have scored 20 plus for 4 different teams is a fantastic stat. And on the topic of landmarks, Jacob Platt now sits 49 career goals, all of which have come for Greenbank. Believe it or not, he is their record goal scorer. Just sits 1 away from a half century. So there is milestones, there is quality, there is depth, but there's also pressure. Because in a title race this tight, 1 defeat can be the difference. But they are, however, still in the John Good Group WFA Cup, where they will face West Bromwich Albion. And if there is a league, if the league escapes them, they will put everything into that cup on Saturday, May the 9th. If we look at game week 5, a kind Saturday versus GB Knights and Middlesbrough, before a tough, potentially season-defining Sunday versus Teesside and Aspire. Now we move on to Aspire. Things get serious because currently 3rd, level on points with Teesside, just 1 behind Leeds, and crucially still unbeaten. And this weekend, fairly faultless, it must be said. They opened with a narrow 1-0 win over GBG Knights. John Dixon with the goal. Then came that clash with West Bromwich Albion. the historic clash of the Powerchair Titans. It never fails to deliver, irrelevant of league placement or momentum. John Balding, inside 3 minutes, set the tone. He added another soon after, and then Dixon rounded it off later on. Sunday morning saw them dispatch Muscle Warriors 5-0, a game where they were able to rotate, experiment, give minutes to the whole squad without losing any level of control, and then finish with a very measured 1-0 win over West Bromwich Albion Throssels, giving them a taste of their own medicine and scoreline. Dixon again, the goal scorer, and remarkably, Aspire extended their winning streak against Muscle Warriors to 19 now. They've won all 19 matches they've played, and Muscles have never scored against them in the league. So 4 games played, 4 wins, 3 clean sheets, and importantly, they now extend what is a 20-game unbeaten run in the league. So it's fairly dominant. Gregg, I'll bring you in. Give me your assessments from Aspire.
It's a bit crazy. We're talking about an unbeaten team that have, won so many, and obviously not lost, and we're talking about them in third, which is just a bit of a crazy stat. Yeah, they were controlled, played some expansive, lovely football, and locked it up when they needed to. They just, you know what you get for Aspire, don't you? John, Dan, and John Balding, Dan McLean, and John Dixon, rather than saying John, Dan, and John, have formed this little trio, attacking wise, going forward, that are now playing excellent stuff. John Dixon's come on leaps. He's another one, I'd say, he's the only one for me that can maybe challenge Ollie Crawshaw and Jacob Butch-Platt as a player that has developed the most over the last 12 to 18 months. He has become vastly one of the sort of the best, most clinical wingers in the division. He has absolutely just flourished at Aspire. The teaching of John Balding has clearly worked for him. I thought John was back to his best this weekend. John Balding making the fantasy team of the weekend. He was a standout player of the weekend. He was just vintage John Balding this weekend, wasn't he? Vintage John Balding at his best. Getting a couple of goals against West Brom that were rolling back the years. They really were. It was like a West Brom Aspire game from years gone by, and John was scoring the types of goals he just loved in those fixtures. He is Mr. Aspire. He is leader, captain. He's the metronome for that side, and they are right in the hunt for another Premiership title. And makes me and you and Chai look even more foolish for not picking him in our draft every time you see him play now. It's like we spurred him on. But yeah, go on.
I was going to say I didn't pick him for the draft, no, but if you go back to the Premiership predictions episode, I did say he would be the standout player of the 25-26 season. So there is something to fall back on.
Okay, just me and Charlie then. We'll let you off then.
And I do want to say that I was the only one to choose an Aspire player within my world draft as well. So I think of the three of us, John will agree with mine more than your two. Anyway, David, give me your assessments from Aspire.
Yeah, I think really it's just showing how dominant they can be. In recent years, they've had to rebuild. Last season, it was a rebuilding stage for them, losing Brad Bates at the beginning of that season and bringing in John Dixon from West Brom Throssels. And I think it's all the pieces have just come together. John Balding is an inspiration to every single middleman aspiring to be as good as he is. He, in my opinion, as a middleman, I base myself off his performances. I will look at his games and go, right, what's he done there? How's he done that? How can I implement that in my game? He is the level. He is the baseline. He is the one where everyone thinks that is what a middleman should be. There are not many people in the world which can challenge the quality of John Balding. Yes, you've got the likes of Momo Galame and you've got Brian Weiss. But if we're looking specifically at the English game, there is no match for him. Dan McClellan as well. He is. Everyone knows how good he is, how young he is, how just ridiculous his performances are. He can hit a ball so sweetly. So sweetly. And finally, John Dixon in the team of the weekend. Rightly deserved as well. Incredible finisher, scoring against his old club, and really he has come on absolutely leaps and bounds since he had made the move to Aspire. But yeah, dominant display from the weekend.
What's interesting about Aspire, and I said something very similar when recapping Manchester United in the Championship, they're so purposeful. They don't necessarily blow opposition away with kind of a continual barrage of pressure. They are measured, controlled, they're clinical in kind of short, sharp bursts. But they've only scored more than one goal in 7 of their 17 matches this season. So this isn't a free-flowing, high-scoring football every time. It's control, it's efficiency, it's knowing how to win. Just to echo some of your points, John Balding, exceptional. When there's doubt, when there's pressure, when there's questions, he delivers. And he's doing so with some crucial goals, because recently he's been almost like the facilitator, the one linking the play, feeding John Dixon, feeding Dan McClellan. Now he's doing both. He was outstanding this weekend, and the goals against West Brom added to an incredible record. He's now scored 48 and 49 career goals in that one, 48 and 49 career goals in that fixture, 37 of which have come in the league. 49 goals against West Bromwich Albion alone. And just to put that into context, West Brom have scored 28 goals in their history against Aspire, 19 in the league. So Balding on his own has outscored the entire club of West Bromwich Albion in that matchup. And what makes it even more telling is before this weekend, he'd only scored once in their last 8 meetings. So when the moment came, when there was pressure, he delivered. John Dixon, exceptional, as you mentioned, fantasy team of the weekend. That goal, if you haven't seen it, his goal against Muscle Warriors, the way he uses the pace and the spin of the ball to just direct it past Hannah Hindley. It's one of the best instinctive finishes I've seen in a very long time. He's on 13 goals now this season, so he's surpassed his 24-25 tally of 11. He's also creating and has double-digit assists, also surpassing his 24-25 tally with one whole game week left to be played. And that is the impact, that is the reliance, and why he's getting recognition from his peers. Dan McClellan, by his own standards, and I said it about Torbjorn Krarup, I said it about Jacob Buck-Platt, I'm going to go on to say it about the likes of Ed Common and Tyler Reeve, quiet by his own standards. But again, it just shows the level he set. When you dip slightly below it, it stands out. But the key thing is Aspire didn't need him at his absolute peak to win all 4 games. Rich George moved on to 97 Premiership goals, and each of those have come in the Premiership division. He's never scored in the Championship, League One, Cup or Playoff before. So a fantastic achievement for him. If we're playing devil's advocate for game week 4 or trying to look for some negatives or some holes, the fixture list was slightly favourable on paper. They faced 12th, 10th, 8th and a West Brom side that we know aren't at their historical level. So they got the job done. But game week 5 is where everything will be tested, because they go straight into Teesside. No easing into the weekend, no warm-up fixture, straight into one of the biggest season-defining games. Then Leeds in back-to-back fixtures. And their season essentially going to be defined with how quickly they come out the traps on April 18th. if they come through those 2 games with 4 or 6 points, and I think that's the minimum you need to lift the title, then it's almost theirs to lose. Anything less, and that dream of relifting the Premiership trophy just slips away, because after that it's Sevenoaks, Villa Rockets before they end the season against Greenbank, but realistically they'll want to decide it before then. Very intriguing, it must be said. Any further thoughts, gents?
No, I just think you can never count out Aspire, can you? They are, perennial winners. They know what it takes to win. It's going to be some exciting end to the season, regardless, because there are big games wherever you look.
There certainly is. Now it's Gregg's favourite time on the podcast, because in second we've got reigning champions Teesside, and it was a busy 5-fixture weekend for a long time that looked to be heading in one direction and one direction only, straight towards the title. Saturday was perfect. They opened with a 5-0 win over GBG Knights, exactly the start you want, especially in that bogey 9:30 fixture. Because if you haven't stayed over, you're traveling in. You have to try and get up to the intensity of the division instantly, and that is not easy, as I'm sure you two will attest. But they handled it well. Then a 3-0 win over Sevenoaks, controlled Professional, and that was followed by a 6-0 win over Muscle Warriors. So by the end of Saturday, that's 14 goals scored, none conceded, 9 points from 9. At that point, you're thinking, this is it. This is a champions weekend. But then Sunday morning, everything shifts. Defeat to Villa, and it could very easily be one of the moments we look back on at the end of the season as potentially costing them the title. To their credit, however, they did respond, a 2-0 win over West Bromwich Albion Throstles to end the weekend. I'm going to come to David first, and then we will throw to Gregg so he can give a player's perspective. David, give me your thoughts on Teesside from Gameweek 4.
Yeah, we all expect the levels from Teesside, and rightly so. They are the league setters. They set the pace, they set the tempo, they set how we believe football should be played in England. Fast, quick-paced, and moving the ball quickly. It's just the nail in the coffin, possibly, for the title when they lost to Teesside. And you're right, Ryan. We could look back on this moment and say, you know what, that could be the defining moment in the title. But I still back Teesside to win the title. And I've said it in my pre-season Premiership predictions. They face Leeds on the last game of the weekend. No, not the last game of the weekend, but their last game of the weekend for both Leeds and Teesside. In my opinion, the title will come down to that game. It will. I cannot see another way that it won't. And I still back Teesside to win it because they know how to do it. They know what it takes in big pressure moments to perform. You've got Ed Common, Tyler Reeve. Even though you said that, Ryan, that they didn't perform to the standards that you come to expect of them, it's very interesting because it's my first Premiership weekend that I've been to, and they were ridiculous. They were insane, and if that's not their best, then it's just monstrous how good they can be.
I know it's ridiculous. I'm fully aware of that a team that has scored 55 goals across their 17 games, I'm there saying, I need a little bit more. I'm being incredibly greedy, but unfortunately that is just the distinction between finishing first and finishing second. You need to be remarkable. You need to be extraordinary every one of the 5 weekends. And because of the world-class standard they have set, both at club and country level, I'm always wanting a little bit more.
Fair enough. I mean, it's always good to, that's how, we get motivated as players, or I can't speak for others, but that's how I get motivated, by saying, you know what, David, do a bit more. Do it a bit more in this aspect. Try this, try that. I think that's how to get the best out of the squad.
I think the moment that you settle with a certain level of performance is the moment you start to regress. So no matter how high the bar is, the aim always needs to be to push it a little bit higher. Gregg, let's bring you in. Give me your thoughts from game week 4, because it was going extremely well and then it just came crashing down against Villa Rockets on Sunday.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting couple of minutes, won't it? I actually echo everything you said, Ryan. To be honest, we looked at this game week 4, and knowing what we had in game week 5, knew that if we were going to give ourselves the best position of retain the title, so that 15 points was going to have to do, because you look at the fixtures we have in game week 5, we play the entire top 6, which is probably now 7th. So we became to it looked like we played the top 6. So we knew we needed points on the doors, and this comes down to the debate, didn't it? We had earlier: is do you want games in hand or do you want points on the doors? I never really felt like we got properly going. Coming into Sunday, yes, we 5-0, 3-0, 6-0. We weren't at our best still. We really, it never really felt like we were playing at our best.
Just on that point,
Right.
there's something that I've said across game weeks 2 and 3, that just from the outside, it looks like you're playing at 50%, but your 50% is capable of scoring 5-6 goals in a game without reply. But if you, on the eye test, when you're watching them, sometimes you're left a little bit underwhelmed. And again, it's incredibly unfair when you are commanding such comprehensive scorelines.
It's not, though. I genuinely don't think it is unfair. The GBG game was excellent for us. The first game at 9:30. We set the standard that game of where we want to be. We scored some lovely goals. 7 Oaks, 3-0. It was, again, some of the goals we scored were brilliant. It was the Muscle Warriors game. You know, we were 1 up at half time, but an own goal. Hadn't really got the ball moving as best as we could. The second half, we took the handbrake off. Tyler Reid was exceptional in that second half. I've got to say, I had the pleasure of sitting back behind him in goal and just watching. He was exceptional. Got his 100th career goal in that game. But we knew that Sunday was going to be more difficult. Villa are always difficult to break down. Had the cup game against them last year where they defeated us on penalties. And Throssels, again, we've seen them beat Greenbank this season, so we knew we were, on paper, as a more difficult game. That Villa game, like you said, we've dominated for 40 minutes. We really have. We tried everything. It just didn't seem to work. We played some nice football at times. I didn't think, again, we didn't reach the levels we had set at times before. We know that. And then, you know, that last, we had to kick in, basically, didn't it? The 40th minute, kick in for us, level with the Villa box. And it breaks off of Hamza Badir's chain. Dave Lewis can carry the ball up the court. I chase back. They win a corner. And I've always said on the podcast, teams, you know, if you can't win a game, don't lose it. And now, because we've lost that point, you know, if we got the point out of that game at 0-0, we're sat here going, we're top on goal difference, and we potentially don't have to go into a game against Leeds needing 3 points. If we win all 4 games up to that Leeds game and Leeds win all theirs, we're still now sat a point behind, and the onus is on us to now go win the game. If we get a point, goal difference aside, who knows how that's going to lie, a draw would potentially be good enough for us to win the league. That's how monumental that last second winner for Villa is.
I'd be very happy if you did go to that last game. It'd be quite entertaining for the neutral perspective.
It certainly will be, but that is the Premiership division. One small mistake can come back to haunt you. But just you were just saying, if you can't win the game, don't lose it. There is not one person on the planet that had Villa winning that game. And that's why you've seen the clip of the goal shared far and wide, why it sent shockwaves through the Lee Western Sports Centre, because it was the most remarkable end to a game. And as I said in the Villa analysis, they breached the Teesside half maybe 2 or 3 times across the game, and probably the Villa box on one occasion, and that was then ushered out for a corner. So I don't know. I mean, 12 points from 15, 16 goals scored, 1 conceded. Most teams in the division would snap your hand off for that return. Just let's focus on some of the individuals. Mitch Tinkler, Tyler Reeve, Ed Common particularly. All incredibly effective, all still contributing to near division leading levels, but none of them really took over a weekend in the way we've seen before. Because in game weeks 1, 2, and 3, certainly, you were hearing their names constantly. They were almost like the talk of the Lee Westwood Sports Centre. And this weekend, that noise wasn't quite the same. On Mitch, the goals are there. He's been incredibly prolific. 20 across the season. He leads the goal scorer chart, but I'd like to see a bit more in terms of his wider impact, the link-up play, the creativity, the ability to influence games a little bit more, because at times that isn't quite there, and Teesside can often seem slightly imbalanced, and that's why I can understand them putting you out, because I think you offer a little bit more versatility, Gregg, than Mitch, but take nothing away from him and his goal scoring, because it at the moment, as shown, it is division leading. But again, I'm harsh, I'm critical, because we know Mitch has aspirations of progressing through the England system to the development squad. So you have to judge him against players within that team.
Yeah, and for all that, there's what I can feel is disappointment from us. And again, it's crazy, isn't it? 12 points from 15, scored 16, conceded only 1. Pretty much every other team in the division is elated with that. But we just knew how important this weekend was to set up for next weekend. But to put it this way, we're averaging 3 goals a game. We've got the second most clean sheets in the division. Mitch is top goal scorer and is probably the most exciting youngster, one of the most exciting youngsters in the division. Some of the goals he scores and the play he has is just ridiculous at times for someone so young. It has to click for us in game week 5. I think to David's point, the thing for us is we've done it before. Last season we had to do this. We had exactly the same situation. We played every team around us a 5-game weekend, and we knew that we had to dig deep, stick together, win all the games to come through and win the title, and we did that. So we have that experience of what we have to do. So I think it's certainly, whilst it's no longer in our hands, so to speak, looking at the points on the doors, because we play everyone, it still is in our hands. We know that, and we're certainly looking forward to scrapping in a couple of weeks' time, because we know the levels we can hit.
No, I'm looking forward to it. Just you mentioning Mitch Tinkler as being one of the best young players in the country, or the Premiership more specifically, that young player of the season is going to be very hotly contested. In the last 4 seasons, I think, it has had a 1, 2, 3 of Ollie Crawshaw, Dan McClellan and Mitch Tinkler. They've kind of always alternated who takes first, second or third. I think this season we weave Jacob Platt into that. I don't know who wins it out of those 4 players. That's the one that's going to be dictated by game week 5 and maybe that recency bias.
I think the thing with Dan McClellan is that people view him not as a young player anymore. They view him as a seasoned, experienced talent for the country. He was representing the English game at the highest level possible. So with Dan McClellan and the young player of the season, I think Dan McClellan would possibly get player of the season rather than the young player.
Well, I told you last season, David, that you were very close to sweeping up both the young player and the player for the Championship division. And that just makes it even more remarkable that these young talents are in contention for the top award as well. But
it just shows that the level and the ability for young players to come in and make an immediate impact is there. I mean, Dan McClellan's done it for numerous years. You've seen the impact that John Bowling's had on him. You've seen the impact that Marcus Harrison has had on Jacob Platt. You've seen the impact that Ed has had on Mitch. Having that sort of mentor to guide you and then show you the elite standards is what is driving these young players forwards. And for us, we know that one game won't define our season. We hope, because I think it's a scary thing for the other teams in the division that we are disappointed having scored 16 and only got 12 from 15. We know there is a lot more there is a level that we can hit that, as we saw last game week, is unmatchable for other teams.
You are the champions, you are the benchmark, so naturally you judge Teesside at that level. And at times, if you are left wanting a bit more, it's not necessarily because of the results, but in terms of the kind of the control, the fluency, the consistency, because we know in a title race this tight, those small dips, even in winning weekends, even in very good weekends, that can often be the difference. And that brings us perfectly on to previewing game week 5, because if they're going to retain the title, they're going to have to do it the hard way. They open up against Aspire before facing West Bromwich Albion and Newcastle in quick succession before finishing with back-to-back fixtures against Greenbank and Leeds. Again, going to sound like a broken record, 0 margin for error. And it's a 5-game weekend that will define their season and very possibly decide the title. Just quickly before I progress on to Leeds, something I just picked up on that you said about Mitch having the role model and the guidance of Ed Common, Dan McClellan having the guidance and the mentorship of John Balding. It's clear that Jacob Platt is Marcus Harrison 2.0. It almost makes Ollie Crawshaw's meteoric rise even more impressive, because I don't think he necessarily has that mentor or role model within the squad. Maybe it was Sam Smith when he was competing at Newcastle, but at the moment, even just at the age of, I think, 17 years of age, he has to be that absolute catalyst, that main player, because there's no one else to fall back on.
Yeah, exactly. I was just thinking that is possibly Sam, but he's doing it all on his own, so to speak. He's, well, not all on his own, but to a point where he hasn't had that sort of shining light and guiding mentor to sort of shepherd him in. He's had to grab the spotlight for Newcastle and take it on himself at such a young age. So it just shows how impressive his rise has been and how the level he's playing to.
Absolutely. So at the top of the table, we've got Leeds, PSC, and just like Aspire, a faultless weekend, maximum points from 4 games, 15 goals scored, just 1 conceded. It was as complete a weekend as you could ask for. They opened up with a 7-0 win over Muscle Warriors, fairly dominant, setting the tone immediately. Then came a huge game against West Bromwich Albion, and Leeds were out the blocks instantly. Lewis Harris scoring within 45 seconds to give them the lead, and from that point they controlled the game. But Leeds just saw it out. Sunday started with a massive fixture against Greenbank, especially so soon after that cup defeat. And again, Leeds delivered a strong win that took them through to their final fixture against Sevenoaks, which they also managed to win by 3-0. So when you zoom out, 4 wins, 4 big performances, and crucially, a win versus a direct title rival. Gregg, give me your assessment on Leeds. Do you see them as your biggest threat for your gold medal, or maybe edge towards Aspire?
I'd like to say that I've been fairly consistent with message all season that Leeds have been my favourites for the title. For good reason. They are, we know what they could do. Put this squad together in the summer, everyone went, whoa, this could be something special. And even after game week 1, it's fair to say everyone went, okay, hang on, maybe it's not what we thought. Are these going to gel together? Like, is it going to have the impact that we think it has? And since then, it's been absolutely superb to watch. It's proper 4-out, free-flowing, attacking football. It's relentless. The power, the precision, the momentum that they generate, the pressure they put teams under is absolutely just really clinical. And they don't give teams any chance to breathe, because you cannot rest for 1 second. They can play the ball back to second pivots, switching wide, and it just is Powerchair Football how it's meant to be played in its purest form for me. It's a joy to watch. I did their game against Leeds, and I said it on commentary, that the biggest compliment I can pay them is they made, and I know we've said with Greenbank, no, they got it wrong, but they made Greenbank look like a bang average side. They really did for me. And Marcus can say he got it wrong, and they did get it wrong a little bit tactically, but Leeds were just, for a side that had just been defeated by Greenbank on a Monday night in the cup game, they were superb. They executed their revenge just perfectly. And what was really pleasing for me was, I know we mentioned that we did the Leeds Sevenoaks game, was, we say it time and time again, but the impact that Jack Maxwell has coming off the bench, he's such an underrated player. You know, he was joint top goal scorer last year, and everyone thought he was going to be just pushed to the wayside when they signed Dylan Kelsey, Ethan Fisher. But he's held his own. He's enjoying his football. He just slots in seamlessly. The goal he scored against Sevenoaks was a brilliant team that he capped off just perfectly. And I just love what they're doing. Like I said, they are my favourites. They have been all season long. It's just, can they do the job now? Can they see it over the line? Can they keep their heads? Because that was one thing I noticed in the Greenbank game was they were 1-0 up and cruising. They were comfortable. And Dylan Kelsey took a quick kick in. And for some reason, Lewis Harris just lost it at him. It's a biggest argument or shout I've seen from a teammate towards another in years, especially given the context they're 1-0 up. And I know that they've made it men's and like Dylan Lewis in the wrong and whatnot, but it just shows the pressure they put themselves under and the pressure they are under. It was bizarre to see, and you hope that doesn't creep in as the pressure just gets ranked up and turned up more in game week 5.
It is a ridiculous, relentless pressure cooker. David, give me your assessment from Leeds, because we spoke about it earlier about squads in National League history and where this current Leeds side ranks amongst the absolute greatest. I think you could ask anyone. This is one of the best starting 4, starting 5 we've ever seen at National League level. You didn't get to call any of their games, but you was up close and personal, hearing, seeing, feeling the intensity. They're special, aren't they?
No, yeah, they're just ridiculous. Their ball playing ability, that they can pick each other out like on a silver platter. They can put a ball on another bumper on a sixpence. It's ridiculous. They literally, you compare it to other squads like that West Brom squad a few years ago, and that would probably be one of the most entertaining matches you'll ever see in your entire life, just because they are so evenly matched with the quality. They're so balanced. Ethan Fisher and Lewis Harris working seamlessly in the middle. I wouldn't describe it as a 4-out, to be honest. I'd more describe it as a 3.5, 3.75 out. just because they're not playing like England where they've got all 4 players in the same half. They've got Ethan tends to drop slightly further deeper. The only question that I have of Leeds was the same as Gregg. Can their mental attitude and psychological perspective of each other not get in the way of their performances? Because one thing that stood out to me was when Leeds played West Brom on the weekend. It was the first time that we've seen a yellow card sin bin ever in the National League so far for Ethan Fisher. And one thing, passion and a fiery nature is, in my opinion, what drives teams forward, what motivates them to keep going. But you don't want them to go overboard. You don't want them to have an emotional, not blackout, but an emotional overload, in the sense that they've got to keep a cool head. And they've never won the league before. And it's just a sense that to win the league, they've got to keep a cool, calm head going into this final game weekend.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about results, but it's more how they're getting the results that impress me most. The combinations and speed of play is the most impressive thing I think I've ever seen at this division. I said it on the Game Week 3 recap, how good it is, how division leading it is, and that still absolutely stands. Just to touch on your points about mentality, and the West Brom game was fascinating, because we've said it all season. If you can disrupt Leeds, if you can get physical, if you can win the psychological battle, you've got a chance. And West Brom tried to do that. They tried to make it scrappy. They tried to get under their skin, and Leeds just didn't budge. They stayed composed. They stuck to their structure, and they gradually, across the 40 minutes, took the game away from their opposition. It's actually the first time Leeds have ever avoided defeat against West Bromwich Albion, having lost their previous 10 meetings. So it was almost like a psychological barrier broken. Dylan Kelsall scored in that game, which means he's now one of just 4 players to have scored against all 12 current Premiership teams. So it shows he's level. Dan Rigby had a brilliant weekend. 50th Premiership goal, 100th league goal. All of which have come for Leeds. 19th player ever to hit that milestone for a single club. But it's not just the numbers for Dan, it's everything else. It's the movement, it's the timing, it's the connection. He's on 19 goals and 14 assists this season. It's an unbelievable output. Another that will most certainly be in contention for player of the season if Leeds are to lift that ultimate crown. Ethan Fisher is the orchestrator. Everything goes through him. He dictates the tempo. He controls the game. He links everything together. He's having an unbelievable season. The irony is, I predicted him to be the player of the season for 24-25, but not 25-26, where it looks like a very real possibility. That said, I would be remiss not to give him a little telling off. So first, the sin bin for dissent against West Bromwich Albion. That's something that the WFA are really trying to clamp down on. We're trying to promote respect for officials. We're trying to raise standards across the board. And when one of the leading players in the country is sitting out for 4 minutes for dissent, it doesn't quite align with that. And then you go on to the Sevenoaks game, and this is when it becomes a lot more deliberate and unsportsmanlike. He's on 2 yellow cards for the season. He knows the next one triggers a 1-game suspension. And clearly there's been a collective decision made, whether that's him or collectively across the whole squad, to take that suspension into their game against West Bromwich Albion Throstles, rather than it potentially falling against one of the big title defining games. He was substitute back on solely with the intention of getting booked. And within seconds, he's slamming into Sevenoaks players, not once, but twice, effectively forcing the referee's hands. Now, competitively, I understand it, but I don't like it. We've seen it in football. We've seen it in this league. And for them, it will be about managing availability across a season. You don't want to see him missing for Aspire, for Teesside in game week 5. But it's the manner of it that doesn't sit right with me. Coming on for 30 seconds, he was so animated, calling over to the coaches because they weren't necessarily singing off the same song sheet. So he's waving his arms in the air, saying, "Bring me back on," which he does for 30 seconds purely to engineer a booking and then celebrating it after. And it just takes away slightly from what otherwise is such a high level professional performance across the weekend. But when you are an England international, when you are one of the faces of the sport, there is a responsibility that comes with that as well. But the player himself, in terms of ability, influence and impact, is absolutely top level, division leading at the moment.
Yeah, Ethan was my pick for standout player of the weekend. I thought he was absolutely superb against Greenbank. It just dictated everything. And he's not the first, by no means is he the first, to deliberately get a booking to miss an on paper easier fixture than ones that he could have. However, the difference was just how blatantly deliberate and obvious it was. Your players, if they've done it before, they've been maybe cute with it. They've bought a yellow card. They've not mentioned anything afterwards. They've not blatantly celebrated it. They've got away with it, knowing they've got away with one, and they're happy about it. It just left a bad taste in the mouth, I think, for people that watched it. And you don't want to see that because he is such a huge talent, one of the best players in the country. It's fastly becoming a face of the sport. And as we see the sport get more and more media attention, we want players to be reminded of what the sport's about, the community, the aspect of everyone being together, winning merit for merit on the court, and not bringing the sport into not disrepute, but to just you don't want people going, Leeds have won the league, but I'm kind of disappointed because they're they've not been as nice about it, because they've played the football they play this season is, like you say, is one of the most attacking and beautiful football we've seen from any team going back. You don't want anyone to be able to take away anything from that. And in doing so, he runs the risk of everyone just going off him a little bit. And you don't want that at all.
No, exactly that. It's just the deliberate nature of it. Just be a little bit cuter. But if we look at Leeds as a whole, it's clear they are looking for every edge. They will try as best possible to control every detail and ultimately do whatever it takes to win. If we look at game week 5, Throssell's, Aspire, West Brom, Newcastle and Teesside, 5 games. And just like the other 3, you can probably say it with me now, gents, no margin for error.
Exactly. One thing that should be mentioned is Marcus Harris is on 5, and I'm pretty certain one more for him results in another 1-game suspension. So that's something to keep an eye on coming to game.
Yeah, no, can I distinguish that? I think one of those was as a yellow card for being a coach in game week 3. So that's separate from a playing yellow card.
Right. Okay. Because I've looked at the scoreline app and it says 5. Okay. That's fine. That's okay. He's 2 away. Then I'll let him off.
No, but that concludes that leads nicely. Ethan Fisher, Dan Rigby in the fantasy team of the weekend, and congratulations to Russ Rigby and Warren Kelsall, who were voted as the coaches of the weekend for the 2nd time this season. Now, gents, we are over 3 hours, so I think this goes down as the longest episode of the 2-on-1 Powerchair Football podcast. So I think it's right we bring it to its conclusion. A massive thank you to MK Battery for continuing to power this podcast and every National League live stream. Strap in for a blockbuster final weekend of the Premiership, April 18th and 19th titles to be decided, relegation battles to be settled, and potentially the most dramatic conclusion we've ever had in the division's history. Top four all playing each other, bottom four all with something on the line. We will be there across the weekend to bring you full coverage, commentary and analysis, and everything you need to follow what promises to be a huge day of sport, few days of sport at that. As always, thank you to everyone that's listening. We will see you next time. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much, Ryan.
Thank you, Greg.
Cheers, Ryan.